Good
Mr. Mayor.
afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to call this meeting of this work session of the Durham City Council to order at 1:00 p.m. on August the 20th, and certainly want to welcome everyone here today, everyone who's a participant in the meeting, as well as our guests. And I'm now going to ask the clerk if she would please call the roll.
Mayor Schul.
Aye. I mean here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Caballero. Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Middleton.
I am here.
Thank you. And Councilmember Reese.
Here I am.
Thank you.
That makes me want to roll my eyes, Mark Anthony. And I see Councilmember Caballero is now here, and I'm sure Councilmember Freeman will be here in a moment. I just want to let folks know that the council, we just got out of a 2.5-hour session this morning, closed session, where we annually evaluate our three employees: the city clerk, the city attorney, and the city manager. And we were with the city clerk and the city attorney this morning, and so we just had a quick break, and we're back at it, and we're glad to be back at it. Alrighty, I'll now ask if there are any announcements by members of the council. Any announcements? All right, seeing none, I'll now ask if there are any priority items by the city manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I do have three priority items this afternoon. Agenda item number 2, which is the 2021 City Council meeting schedule. Attachments 2 and 3 have been updated. Agenda item number 12, which is the 2020 second quarter crime report. We have added attachments 3 and 4 to that item. And finally, agenda item number 16, which is the property tax relief program. Attachment 1 has been updated and attachment 2 has been added. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Manager, and it's good to see you sitting in today for the city manager and practicing for your upcoming role. I will now accept a motion to approve the manager's priority items.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Reese. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Middleton.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it 5-0, and the motion passes. We'll now move to any priority items by the city attorney. Let's see, is the city attorney with us? Our evaluation must have truly worn her out, but I'm sure she'll be with us in a moment, and we'll come back to her for any potential priority items. Madam Clerk, do you have any priority items today?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. The City Clerk's office has no items.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we'll now move on to the departmental items. The Budget and Management Services Department, item 1, proposed Durham City Coronavirus Relief Fund CRF plan, and I'm going to pull this item for discussion. Item 2, 2021 City Council meeting schedule.
Can we pull that, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. We'll pull item 2 as well. Item 3, Department of Transportation increase in civil penalties for parking violations. I'm also going to pull item 3. Item 4, contract with Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. for parking facilities condition assessment and maintenance repair. Item 5, ordinance to change parking fees. Item 6 under Department of Water Management, agreement with the town of Hillsborough respecting mutual aid for drinking water supply. I don't want to pull this item, but I would appreciate if the administration could let us know by email whether or not this partnership has been activated in the past with Hillsborough and who was the conveyor and receiver of the water. Under Finance Department, item 7, bid report. Under Police Department, item 8, TASER replacement program. I'd like to pull item 8. Under Public Works Department, item 9, East Durham Water and Sewer Rehabilitation Project Phase 1, City Contract Number 16208-Amendment Number 1. Under Presentations, the Department of Transportation, item 10, Update on Durham County Transit Plan. Item 11, Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Update. Item 12, under Police Department, 2020 Second Quarter Crime Report. Under Public Hearings, Finance Department, item 13, resolution approving the issuance by the Public Finance Authority of its Educational Facilities Revenue Bond, Trinity School, Series 2020. Under City County Planning Department, item 14, consolidated annexation, Leesville Road, assemblage. Item 15, consolidated annexation, 1101 Olive Branch Road. Under supplemental items, City Council's office, item 16, property tax relief program. Madam Manager, I have 4 items that were pulled, items 1, 2, 3, and 8. Is that what you have?
That is what I have as well, sir.
And we also have 4 presentations, I believe. We have the
There are 2 transportation items, the police crime report, as well as the tax item. All our presentations today.
Okay, great. Do you have an order that you would like them to occur in, Madam Manager?
Unless you have another order, we were planning to present them in the order that they appear on the agenda today.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, we'll now move to the pulled items. And let me just, I'm going to, if colleagues, with your approval, I'm going to do items 2, 3, and 8, and then come back to item 1. I have a feeling item 1 will have more discussion, and I'd like staff to be able to deal with those last 3 items, which I think will be rather quick, and then they can leave the meeting if they would so choose. So item 2, Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had not had a chance to review the revised schedule that was just recently uploaded. Now that I've done that, my concerns were addressed, and I want to thank the administration for taking into account those of us who celebrate Christmas and Christmas Eve to move our work sessions that are those weeks back a little bit further in the calendar. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I had.
You know, I was disappointed in that because with a work session on Christmas Eve, I thought, I'll be the only one here. I can make all the decisions by myself. We'll get, and apparently that won't be working. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, item 3, pulled item 3. This is around an increase in civil penalties for parking violations. My first question was just a correction in the memo about the language, and that's I believe that's been corrected, Sean.
That's correct, sir.
The staff is now, instead of it's a $30 fine instead of the civil penalty of $30 instead of the civil penalty of $20 is indicated in the memo language, right?
That's correct.
And then has this been, can you talk about this in relationship to our citywide project on equity and fines and fees?
Certainly. So we've been
Why don't you
engaged.
introduce yourself, Sean,
Oh,
also?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council. Sean Egan, Transportation Director for the City of Durham. So we've been working with the Office of Policy and Innovation and Budget and Management Services on the effort that's being led by Councilmember Freeman to look at racial equity and disparities in fines and fees collected by the city. So that effort is getting underway now. We've already gotten the data collection request from that team, and we'll be working with them to provide any information that we can to support that effort. And we'll be looking forward to any recommendations coming out of that group that we can incorporate into our parking fine and fee structure going forward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Wanted to make sure that that was the case, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions on item 3? All right. If not, we'll move to item 8. And this is the TASER replacement program. And I see Sean Huey's here. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Mayor. Sean Huey, Fiscal Services Manager for the Police Department.
Sean, looking at the workforce statistics for this employer, they have a very small number of African-American employees amongst a very large employment base or employment population. And I wondered if anyone was here from the vendor who could speak to that.
I believe they are listening in, but they were not able to get an invitation to join the meeting, but I can send them an email, contact our representative with the vendor, and have them address any questions that you have for that.
So my concern and the council's concern.
Yes.
And so my questions would be, I would like to understand what their hiring policies are, what they do to encourage a diverse and create a diverse workforce. Do they reach out to HBCUs? I'm not sure where this company is located, but assuming they're located where there are HBCUs, do they reach out to them? What other efforts do they make to diversify their employment? And would appreciate knowing that before we vote on the contract on 10 days from, or well, actually it'll be a little bit longer than that now, but at our next council meeting.
Yeah, we can get that, no problem.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions for someone from the police department about our TASER policies. Can someone give us some information about the circumstances under which officers are permitted to use these weapons?
Yeah, we have somebody online.
I see Chief Davis coming on.
Good
Thanks.
afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. There is an existing policy that aligns with our use of force policy, where the use of the TASER is deployed in a gradual fashion according to whatever the situation, dictates. And of course, the TASER is a less lethal option for officers. So I can absolutely get the policy to you to help, better understand the use of TASERs, and also the numbers of deployments of the TASERs that we have had. The officers haven't used our TASERs frequently, but we will be happy to get that information to you, Mayor Pro Tem.
That would be great. Thank you. And also, why are we replacing our current stock?
It's the life of the equipment is sort of a replacement at this point. And the package was certainly a more frugal option for us as opposed to just purchasing tasers as they need to be replaced for repair or whatever the case might be. With this particular package, we have a 5-year plan so that if we have to replace a taser or have it repaired, it's automatically done without having to incur any additional costs or purchase another piece of equipment. Tasers run about $1,500 a piece.
Okay. And if they're not being used very often, do you anticipate a lot of maintenance costs? Or like
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, we don't. And of course, historically, that would be information that would need to pull for you as it relates to what our maintenance has been in the past. The replacement of the tasers is sort of it's like computers. You know, once they get upgraded and once the life cycle of the taser is complete, we replace it with a better functioning device, and even sometimes with different features included, to include compatibility with cameras and so on as well.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and some information about the circumstances under which these are used and how much they're being used in the city would be great. Thanks.
Since we have time now between now and this item coming back before you, we can provide that information in the interim.
That'd be perfect. Thanks so much.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Hewley. Any more questions for them? All right, thank you. Well, now I want to say that Attorney Rayberg is with us in the meeting. She had a little technical difficulty getting on, and she let me know through the chat that she has no priority items. All right. Now we'll move back to item 1. Item 1 is the proposed city coronavirus relief fund CRF plan. And I see Ms. Johnson is with us.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Bertha Johnson, Director of Budget and Management Services. This item is the proposed plan for using the $2.9 million allocated to the city of Durham from the Coronavirus Relief Fund established under the CARES Act. We are recommending approval of this proposed plan with one adjustment. Subsequent to submitting this agenda item, we were informed by Jody Miller, General Manager at the county, that a portion of the funding for the Health Ambassadors Program would not be eligible. So this would take our cost down to $89,000, which is a savings of $234,000. That is contingent upon the county funding their share. And as we talk about the savings, I wanted to mention that one other item we discussed in terms of a good use of funding is for the delinquent water bills. That is not included here because it is so restrictive in terms of eligibility for individuals. With the program, the individual would have to attest or verify that the reason they cannot pay their utility bill is due to COVID-19 in terms of job loss or illness. And the second reason for that not being included in this is that we don't know what that number is going to be at this point. We would not have that number until later September, at the end of September probably. And the number, of course, is probably going to be significantly higher than the $234 savings from this. And again, the county will not decide as to if they will approve their share of this until that meeting on Monday. So I'm happy to answer any other questions. And again, we have to submit this plan to Durham County by August 28th. Thank you very much.
Let me just ask for a clarification first on the Health Ambassador Program. The amount that is eligible for CARES Act funding is how much?
$89,000, our share. That's 50% of the $178,000. What they will not cover is travel, tuition, or any kind of administrative cost. So that means that we had to reduce it by $102,000. We would find the additional funding, of course, to make sure that we cover our share from our COVID-19 fund.
And so our local funds, our local COVID
Yes,
funds.
that's correct.
And so do you have a recommendation as to how to use the rest of the CARES Act funding?
I think first we need to wait to find out if the county is going to fund their share at the full amount. And secondly, again, we are still looking at how we can address the utility bill issue. And we also don't have the final cost on the DHA properties, internet access we have in this plan. So we are still finalizing that cost. So again, we have more than enough expenditures to cover $2.9 million. I think originally when we discussed all of the options that qualify, we were at about $4.9 million. So we certainly have enough expenditures to cover this. I just wanted to share this adjustment that we have made and will be in the final plan.
And so this needs to be submitted by August the 28th.
Yes.
And we're not meeting. I guess what I'm asking is, do you want us to approve some options for what the rest of that money would be? Do you want us to give you the authority to fill the gap? How would you like to proceed?
What I would like to do is to add that amount contingent upon the county funding their share of the ambassadors program, add that amount to the DHA proposal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'll pull this item, and I do have a couple of questions, and then I know there'll be a lot of people have thoughts about this. There's $50,000 in the plan for communication, and I was wondering how that was different from the expenditures to support the Back on the Bull campaign.
So that amount will be used to supplement those efforts in collaboration with the Durham Public Health Department as well as the task force.
Okay. And the job kiosks, what are the job kiosks?
So what we're proposing is funding 5 job kiosks to be located in places throughout the community for residents to apply for positions at the city of Durham. Locations where residents are able to go now, such as the Durham Health and Human Services Complex, some of those facilities. And so because we had this plan together very quickly, we have not determined those locations, but we do know that is a need in the community.
They would be to apply for jobs at the city of Durham only, or would there be other potential employers who would be part of it?
At the city of Durham only. However, with the Durham Work Center, there's an opportunity to also collaborate with them.
Great. Well, that's exciting to hear. And then another question is, how was the project to wire the DHA properties previously proposed to be funded?
There was not a funding source identified. As we all know, this has definitely been an expedited need based on the virtual learning needs in the community. Duke University had designed had done the design work and donated, I believe, the cost of that. Deputy City Manager Page was involved in that program and has been working with Duke as well as Anthony Scott at DHA. And we know this is an immediate need, and I know that she was waiting on the final costs for that project.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would just jump in to briefly say a couple of things related to that project. But I would preface it by saying this plan that you all are looking at today, it is a plan that can be amended. You know, as Bertha has mentioned, we had to actually pull together some priorities on a pretty, fast timeline. And some of the, particularly the DHA network, campus network, we don't have final estimates from Duke Office of Information Technology that's really doing the design work for us for those 9 properties. But we do believe that the number that we have there is in the ballpark. And, certainly from the staff and the folks that have been working on this particular project and the digital divide, the need that we have in the community that really just didn't start with COVID, but it actually has been accelerated with COVID. We want to keep, working every day to refine those numbers, but in the end, we can certainly make modifications to our plan that we submit to Durham County as long as they're eligible costs for the funding source.
Great, thank you very much. I think y'all have done a great job with this on a very fast timeline. I think all those expenditures sound really good. I wanted to bring into the conversation, we've gotten a request from the Durham Public Schools Foundation and their partners to fund or to help fund Hope Centers, they're called, for families and for children who are in need of a place to go during the school year to get help with their schooling. They may need particular kind of help. They may need computer access that they're not able to get from home, even with the hotspots. They may have various kinds of needs that would get them to need to be outside their home and in a place where they can get some assistance. It may be that their parents aren't able to help them and need to go to work. I mean, there are all kinds of possibilities. And I think this is a very, very important and worthy cause. And I know that some of the folks are here today. I've asked Megan Gonzalez-Smith from the Durham Public Schools Foundation, Boris Perry from the YMCA, Alexandra Zagbayu from the Student U, and I believe I saw Dr. Hardy from Durham Public Schools. I'm not sure if all of them are here, but I do want to acknowledge them and appreciate them being here. And I thought it would be useful if we could hear from them about their proposal, because I know that they want that to be in our funding mix, if not through these funds, through some other funds. And so I will ask now, is Megan here? Megan, are you with us on this call?
Hi, Mayor Schul. I am here, as well as the other partners who you just recognized are all with us as well.
Great. So Megan, could you just give us a brief overview of the Hope Centers and what you would like, what your request from the city, and anything else that you would like to offer. And then I know there'll be questions for Ms. Zagbayu, Mr. Perry, and Dr. Hardy. There'll probably questions for all of you also. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Hope Center partners, all of our lead partners, of which are here with us today, we really appreciate you all adding this item for consideration. We know, as we've been hearing since the start of this meeting, and in so many other spaces, that the city is responding to a huge range of critical needs that are facing our community during this crisis, and we really appreciate you considering how the Hope Centers fit into this wide array of needs that the city is helping address. The Hope Center's proposal that we shared a few days ago is responding to the child care crisis that so many families are facing and the need for our most vulnerable students in DPS to have a safe, nurturing environment to access their online learning, as well as social emotional supports and food while our schools are 100% remote. The Hope Centers represent a community partnership, and it is our hope that Durham City, as well as Durham County, will join as partners in this, as we have seen city and county governments do in comparable efforts in other communities. The model for these learning centers was developed by DPS, Student U, YMCA, Durham Children's Initiative, Made in Durham, Emily Kay, and the Boys and Girls Club. Hope Centers is the name for the partnership of these organizations, as well as others who may join, who will offer what we often refer to as learning centers. DPS Foundation is a partner in this effort in raising philanthropic support to help ensure all students who need free access to Hope Centers can do so. As we all are closing out the first week of 100% remote digital instruction for DPS students, we know that we are only at the beginning of what's going to be an incredibly challenging and unpredictable school year. This will be true for all of our 33,000 plus students in DPS, but we know that our families who are facing increased economic hardship during this crisis and our most vulnerable students have the most to lose in this moment. We believe that a large and critical piece of Durham's equitable recovery must be providing safe and nurturing places for our most vulnerable students to access their online learning and social emotional support and meals. We believe our community has the responsibility to provide the space to those students who require it in order to successfully access their online learning, and to our families experiencing a child care crisis and facing the impossible decisions about whether to go to work, if they're required to go to work in person, or provide necessary supervision and support, especially to our youngest children who are doing online learning. We believe that if our community fails to deliver a response to this critical need, we will see a loss of learning and the wide impacts that we know happen as a result of lack of social emotional support for our most vulnerable students that will have lifelong implications on their well-being and earnings, as well as on our local economy. The Hope Centers will be a community-wide effort. We think that they must be. We're having deep conversations right now with the county about how they will provide funding that's necessary, and with DPS and funding that's necessary for DPS and community partners who will be delivering the Learning Centers model. We're asking the city to also join as a partner at some level in meeting this need for our families. So we shared a proposal which shows what Hope Center partners believe to be the full scope of need and the associated full costs. We estimate that 3,000 students in Durham will need free access to Hope Centers in order to succeed during remote learning. The cost for delivering this model is $200 a week per student. We know that DPS will be 100% remote for at least the first 9 weeks of school, but we expect there will be some ongoing need for Hope Centers all year and that we need to plan accordingly. So providing Hope Centers to the 3,000 students we believe will have the need for the full semester. If we looked at that for the full semester, that would be $8.4 million. If we're to scale this back due to funding constraints and look at a different scenario, we also showed that if we looked at serving 1,500 students for the first semester, that would be $4.2 million. The county is meeting on Monday to continue their discussions about how they will support this, and the DPS Foundation is committed to contributing with philanthropic support. We're asking the city to consider how funding, as well as staffing and space, can be contributed to help meet this need. I'm really grateful that Dr. Hardy is able to join us to address questions related to DPS's support and commitment around learning centers, as well as our lead partners in the Hope Centers, Alexandra Zigbayu with Student U and Forrest Perry from the YMCA. And we are all happy to answer whatever questions you all have now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonzalez-Smith. We're happy to have you. Colleagues, questions, comments? I think I'll recognize Councilmember Caballero. We spoke at length about this yesterday. I know you have questions, and if you would like to go ahead and get started, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the variety of community partners who have come together on this. I know it's a critical need in our community. I have several follow-up questions. So my understanding is that it's essentially breaking down to $200 a week per child for these centers, regardless of how, and in the proposal, there's a variety of scaling up or scaling down. And in that proposal, there's costs for transportation and food. And I was curious as to, because of free and reduced lunch programs and school buses, why is the cost of food and transportation being included in the overall cost per child?
I can start to answer that question. Alexandra Zagbayi, student youth, thank you for that. We included the comprehensive cost with the anticipation and from our conversations with the district that partners will need to take on that cost. If the district is able to provide and the community able to provide support for that, then the cost would go down. But the reason why the cost is $200 per hour, $100 per week for all day support is because we're including all of what the potential cost might be in that to be reflective of the need. So if we need to provide food every day for students for breakfast and lunch, the costs are included in that. Now, we just heard, I believe yesterday, potentially hopeful news that we could get food made from DPS and delivered to students through volunteers. So Dr. Hardy can speak to that. But as we were planning for that, there was not yet any guidance from the federal government that we were going to be able to have access to food from the district, which is why the cost is included in that. But I can pass that on to Dr. Hardy so that she can answer that question from what is the flexibility that we have not heard from the federal government on that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Are you able to make yourself heard?
I think so. I'm not sure I can. I'm happy to show on camera, but I think I've been disabled. And I appreciate the Zoom security. We're also doing that with our teachers as we have lots of synchronous learning happening across the district. I have just sent an inquiry. There have been some potential updates regarding what we are able to provide regarding food for students that are not at our sites participating in the Hope Learning Centers. I'm hopeful that I will get an answer while we're on this meeting. If I don't, I will make sure to follow up with Ms. Gonzalez-Smith and Ms. Agbayu.
Thank you. It's my understanding. Mayor, can I continue with my questions, or do you want to give?
Yeah, no, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. So additionally, my understanding is at this point, DPS has only opened up 6 of its buildings to this potential effort. And curious, Dr. Hardy, as to why the DPS would not want to open up more of its buildings, especially if it would lower the cost per student.
This is just, we are definitely partnering with our community partners. We are trying to make sure that we have 3,000 seats. And this is just the beginning. Just as we have began school, we have also opened up our buildings so that our teachers have access to their classrooms to provide instruction throughout the day for our synchronous learning activities. And we are continuing to monitor. Our sites are, the K-5 sites are planning to open on Monday. And so we're monitoring the application. We're not at a place where we're not at wait list yet. And so we want to make sure that we are providing and partnering. We want to make sure that we have at a minimum those 3,000 seats across for our students to have safe spaces.
Thank you. So I appreciate that this effort has been brought before us. I do want to disclose that I sit on the Durham Public Schools Foundation. I apologize that I did not share that information earlier. It does not change anything as far as a vote of approval or not as a council member. I have consulted with the city attorney's office around this. I want to just say that I support this effort. I have a lot of questions and reservations. I am eagerly awaiting to see what the county is willing to fund in this effort before I would feel comfortable making any commitment as a council member. As we've seen with the Health Ambassadors Program, and this came up with the Health Ambassadors Program, typically the county, for clarification, what kind of lanes that we operate in, and public health and education are clearly within the county's purview. I also recognize that we are in a crisis with COVID, and so we are being asked to rise to this challenge as a city, and I appreciate and am, full throttle support, but I feel that I would like to understand better the commitment coming from the county before I put any city money to this effort. I also, with the Health Ambassadors Program, we found out today that while we had an amount we'd all agreed to, it came back to us that we weren't able to because of the parameters of the CARES money. So I also want to raise that as a potential kind of flag that this may also affect what we do with the Hope Centers. So again, just to clarify, I appreciate this effort. I support it, but I have a lot of reservations around supporting it. And I also want to see DPS help us by expanding transportation and food, expanding access to that, which lowers the cost, and also the commitment from the county before I'm willing to put a dollar amount.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Councilmember Reese, and I believe Councilmember Middleton, you'll be next, okay? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Megan Gonzalez-Smith and the community partners for coming forward with a plan to address what exists as a real need in our community as a result of remote instruction for DPS students for the next, I guess, almost 8.5 weeks. I will first say that I've got 2 of those students upstairs from me right now, which is why I'm occasionally turning off my video feed, because we have 4 video streams going simultaneously, and 2 for my daughters, 1 for my wife who's trying to run our family business from home, and then me down here. And so that's, if you see me turn off my camera, that's why. The other thing I want to make sure I get out early is the fact that my wife, Dr. Laura Helms Reese, sits on the board of the Durham Public Schools Foundation and has been involved in the private fundraising aspect of this specific project, similar to how my colleague, Councilmember Caballero, described. There are very strict rules about how conflicts of interest work in local government, and the relationship that my wife has with the Durham Public Schools Foundation board and this specific project does not present a conflict within the meaning of our rules. And so given that, I am able to participate in this decision, the conversation, and any ultimate vote on it. Having gotten all that stuff out of the way, I wanted to say how this, while, as I said, I really appreciate this effort and the development of this plan, it comes to us in a very awkward time. The publication of today's work session agenda late last week was the first time that I, as a council member, knew that we were in line for additional CARES Act funding. And our staff has worked diligently to put together a plan for spending that $2.9 million that's due to the county next week. And that plan is before us on the agenda today. It does not include $1.9-ish million for the Hope Centers. And so I guess my first question is, has the administration had an opportunity to review the proposal by the community partners who've put forward the Hope Center proposal? And if so, why was the decision made by staff not to include that in their proposed budget?
Madam Manager.
Thank you. We have received, and as you mentioned, the communication has been very recent. I can say to you that when we received the communication, the memo, we already had a team inside working on prioritizing how we might present this plan to the county that is due to them on August 28th. We have all read it, but we have not had direct communication with the team that put it together to specifically ask questions or do any type of analysis. As Bertha has mentioned, we have a lot of needs, and we have several, pools and pots of money. And our focus around this item that you're reviewing today, has been on giving you, some very high priorities as we see them that we could advance on to Durham County. Bertha's team has been working hand in hand with Jody Miller at the county so that we kind of know what is covered and not covered before we submit the final paper, which is why you have some adjustments in front of you today of things that would not be covered in this conversation. So that is the answer. We have not done detailed analysis or had meetings with the team that put the proposal together.
I guess what I should have started with is the threshold question: is the expenditure being requested of us by the Durham Public Schools Foundation and our community partners, is that an allowable expense for the $2.9 million of funding we're getting from the federal government, then through the state, then Durham County, and then to us?
Good afternoon, Bertha Johnson. I would say that Jody Miller and I had that discussion today. We had our meeting today, and to DCM Page's comments, we did receive this communication after we had already finalized our numbers and our plan to submit as an agenda item. Jody is not convinced that this item would qualify for this funding source because it really is what's mentioned in the guidelines that we have, and so you could always request an exception, but it's really related to distance learning based on what is required to be compliant with whatever health measures are around distance learning. And so we are not really sure if this will qualify, and Jody has reached out to the state to ask that very question. As of today, she has not received a response, but we're not convinced that this would be an eligible use of the resource.
Councilmember Reese, can I just clarify one thing before you get going? That I think that most of our colleagues know, I'm not sure, but Jody Miller for the county is our community's expert now on what is FEMA reimbursable, what is CARES Act reimbursable. She is in the Emergency Operations Center. That's been her role. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew that that's the reason why she's being invoked here.
Great. Well, those were the questions I had for staff about this particular proposal. I do have one kind of fundamental question from Ms. Gonzalez-Smith, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about it and then ask her to respond. And it's just to draw, I guess, a little bit of a firmer line under the remarks made by Councilmember Caballero a few minutes ago. In my mind, when I think about how projects get funded in our community, and when I look at a proposal like the one that's before us today for the Hope Centers, what I think ought to happen is that Durham Public Schools and the community partners would sit down and figure out what they want to do, how much money that's going to cost. And I feel like that work has been done. Appreciate Dr. Hardy being involved in this conversation and in the planning effort, and obviously the community partners with DPSF as well. And then I would have expected then that proposal to go to the county commissioners and the county administration for a funding request, given that that is how we fund public education in this state. And that if the county didn't feel that it had sufficient resources to fund that plan fully, then the county can come and ask the community, the state of North Carolina, the city of Durham for additional resources to fill whatever gap exists. Instead, what has happened is that the proposals come to us in a 50-50 split that I think is based not on any math, but on the idea that the city and the county should, in some kind of moral sense, be equally committed to seeing this project go forward. And so I guess my question, Megan, is why was that choice made? And why are you coming to talk to us first instead of the county when, to be completely and totally honest about it, the city has not seen any unrestricted CARES money to date, not one red cent. The county of Durham will, at the end of this current process, have received a total of about $11.6 million in CARES funding. Because of a change in the state law, they are now required to give the city of Durham at least $2.9 million of that total. Of that $11.6 million, they've already received somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million or thereabouts, and are set to receive another $6.9 million, of which 2.9 would go to the city and $4 million would go to the county. That is the bare minimum of what the city is required to get from the county of that funding pursuant to state law. The other bit of context here is that the city itself, I guess I should say Go Durham, has received some federal money to make up for losses in the transit system. The city has received a certain amount of housing money, a huge percentage of which we gave to the county to support rental assistance for families who desperately need it, and I'm proud of that decision. But other than that, we haven't gotten any federal money. And so the $2.9 million that we expect to get from the county, from the state, from the federal government, filtered down to us, is the only unrestricted or at least moderately restricted CARES funding we will receive as a city. And you're here asking us for $2 million of that when the county will have already received so much more federal money than that, including $4 million free and clear of the 2.9 they're getting from the city next week, which, if I do my math right, is sufficient to fund the ask you're putting before the city today for both the city and the county, both the 70% of the cost of the program. So Megan, I guess I'm looking for a little bit of trying to understand why you're here asking us instead of going to the county first in that context. And I appreciate you bearing with me on the length of the question.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate that. I will start and then let some of my partners chime in too, if they have additional context to add that may be helpful. In terms of the timing, we sent the request simultaneously because of our understanding of the really quick timeline to designate CARES Act funding, which we believe this is eligible for. And so what was communicated to us was city and county are looking at all the needs, get something to us quickly. And certainly it was much faster than we would have liked. We would have loved to be able to have more engagement ahead of time. We've been working in close partnership with DPS for a while to determine how many seats they would be able to provide, which was then going to provide us with the context of what additional gap needed to be filled. And that's where we got into kind of the time crunch that we're in. We brought this was the one of the main agenda items on the county commission meeting earlier this week. And so we had a lengthy discussion with them then. We have been talking with county commissioners about this all week. It will be back on their agenda on Monday. I think it's completely understandable that the county would provide a larger proportion of the funds. And we also think it is still a relevant ask for the city in the light of the crisis response. And I know that the proposal we sent said, 35% from each. And I think what we're really trying to show in that proposal is here's what we see the full need is. This is what DPS is going to begin with. What is possible from the city and the county? How much of this need together can we meet? And that's the conversation that we're trying to have. And we completely understand that the city wants to wait until after the county commission meeting on Monday and see what they do before making any further decision about what the city might do. And do any of the other partners want to add anything to that or clarify anything I shared?
Hi, Forrest Perry with the YMCA, Mayor Schul, Madam Pro Tem, council members, thank you for having us today. I'd just like to echo what Megan said. Councilmember Reese, I understand as a matter of process, there's probably a different way that we would all like to see this kind of play out from a timing and urgency. But I think it's the urgency that has brought us to you today. As only a few weeks ago, the DPS, along with other districts, had to pivot in a very quick and rapid way to prepare for the reality that we're faced. I know you said you've got your kids at home, and I've been home with my first grader as well a little bit this week. I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Alex, but I think I could share a sentiment that we probably both share, is that we come to you today as community partners. who have been called upon by our families and the communities that we serve to step into this void in some way. And so we're trying to get there as quickly as we can, hence kind of the all-in approach and reaching out to the city and the county and DPS kind of all at the same time. I think what I can say with confidence is Student U, the YMCA, Parks and Rec, other entities in the community are prepared to step in and help. But there's really two big gaps that we just don't have the capacity to overcome on our own. And one of those is space, locations to do this program. And so as you are all aware, right now, I'll use myself as an example, the YMCA is not able to currently function as people might have envisioned a YMCA once did. So we have kind of made a shift, and we're using a couple of our facilities starting on Monday as learning centers. And so we are mobilizing the assets we have, but that's on a limited basis. And when you look at it from a county perspective, the county, the city, and DPS, just kind of truthfully control a majority of the square footage that we could do these programs, as well as significant access to funding. And so for us as community partners, we're trying to come to the table as quickly as we can to help. We realize that there could be a different process to go through, and we trust that conversations between the city and county will help lead to fruitful conversations between the entities. But again, we come here today in a desire to help, in a desire to serve. Again, as Megan mentioned earlier, we know at least for 9 weeks, students are going to be remote. But even when they do transition back at some point, there's going to be an element of virtual that's going to be part of their work for the foreseeable future. And so we sincerely appreciate Dr. Hardy and Dr. Mabanga's support and guidance as we have come together really to try to leverage this community effort to do what we think is most important, and that's to meet the needs of our students and families. So lots of different paths to get there, but that's really the ultimate outcome that we'd like to see.
Hi everyone, Alexandra Zagbayu again from Student U. I wanted both to echo what Megan and Forrest have said, but also want to talk a little bit about how the Durham community came together. So we started to actually have these conversations about the need to create space after DPS announced on June 24th that 11,000 high school students would not have in-person support in the Plan B. And the original partners were thinking about how do we create space for high school students, really with our number one focus there at the time was so many of our students who are in vulnerable economic positions that this might be the moment in their educational career where they might be forced to choose work over school if they do not have space to go to school and are living with the increased economic instability of their families, which we know is happening in Durham. You have more of a sense than I do of the number of people who have lost full-time employment or working less hours in this moment and therefore have real financial challenges. This conversation certainly shifted very quickly when our district became remote first, but I think that in talking about the need for urgency, we are focused not only on space, but we're focused on free space. There are plenty of other spaces that are opening in our community that are that have a cost that we believe will be cost prohibitive for the children that we are most concerned about. And so this need of the approach, we will know better for the next time we have to do some collective organizing of who the proposals need to go first. And I understand the need to follow protocol, but I also want to reiterate that children started school on August 7th in our community, in our small high schools, that the rest of our students started school on August 17th. And every day we are, in my perspective, behind the ball of being able to really ensure that our most vulnerable students have access to their space. The reason why we are pushing for some hopeful directions from you all about the funding is our desired hope, the Y is able to start next week, but by September 8th, we want as many of these learning centers to be online to ensure that we can support students. And so we have partners who have been doing all of the planning to make sure that the spaces will be safe. We're working with the new DPS volunteer medical corps that will be in spaces to ensure children and staff are safe. We are going to work to think about how do we bring food if the district is not able to bring in that cost, how do we do that in a way that supports all of the learning centers. We're making sure that these spaces will be healthy spaces for social emotional development of students, and we have all of those plans, but we need to hire staff. I work for Student U, and we are 100% ready to mobilize the WG Fishman Center to do that work. But the sheer cost of spending potentially $20,000 a week to provide this space is cost prohibitive for us as well to be able to be here in the long haul for our community, which is extremely important. And so I think my plea to you all is, what is the space that our city can participate in a way that makes sense? And I fully agree that we need to wait for directions from the county as well. But I also, for myself, am thinking about what are the repercussions if we don't do this now, right? In the future, when we're talking about these numbers of learning loss for students, especially for what everyone is estimating will be Black and Brown students and students from who experience economic instability, that loss will be life altering and will become a loss of future taxpayer dollars and all of those things that we care about. And so I want us to hold the urgency of this moment, but also the long-term impact to our city if we do not mobilize our resources in time to have do the most good for our young people who deserve all of us to be stretched outside of what we normally do, which for us, Student U running a day center for potentially all year is completely outside of what we normally do, but we think is necessary in this moment to show up for our students.
Thank you, Ms. Agbayu. Councilmember Middleton, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Smith and Ms. Agbayu and Mr. Perry and Dr. Hardy. Good to see you all. Listen, first of all, the Hope Centers, I think, have to happen. They are, I think, a wonderful response to what I believe is a clear and present danger to our city and to our children. So I certainly don't need to be sold on the merits of the center. I think they have to happen. With that said, I want to associate myself with the caveats that Councilor Caballero intoned, and also with Councilor Reese, who, as he often does, I think, delineated some concerns in a very concise and on-point way in terms of the pot of money that should be the primary and perhaps even the only pot to fund these. But I for the record, I'm fully prepared as a city to act and support this. And again, Councilor Reese voiced some of my curiosity about how this got on our radar so quickly, and some of the processes that brought it to us at this point. And I understand that we're up against timelines, but I do have some questions about, there seem to be a number of pots of money that we're referring to, the $5 million that we put aside as a city, then of course CARES money that's coming to us. First question I want to ask, and perhaps you can answer this, Mr. Mayor, does the DPS Foundation have representation on the Recovery and Renewal Task Force? Has this proposal been vetted by them?
No, it hasn't. I will say that I did, when I heard the proposal from Ms. Gonzalez-Smith, or heard about it, I suggested that she go ahead and get it to us because we were going to be discussing these funds, but it hasn't been to the Recovery and Renewal Task Force.
Okay, because I know they've got an ask first. I guess in terms of, again, philosophically supporting it, that's not the issue for me anymore. It's the process and the pot of money that we're looking at. I think Councilor Reese's points were very compelling in terms of the amount of money that it's going to take to fund it. And finally, alas, the city's got our hands on some unrestricted CARES funds, and then to kind of turn right back around and devote it to something that kind of everybody just viscerally says, and not just viscerally, it's actually within the county's purview, education. I remember one time I think I quipped that, I wish we could make DPS a city line item, and I was promptly told by the city attorney's office, we can't do that. Never say that again. But so the supporting it for me is a foregone conclusion. I just want to make sure that I want some clarity as to what pot it would come from. Again, I think Councilor Caballero was spot on in terms of what is the county going to do, since this is most decidedly education within their purview. Education. Our children are our children, and making sure they have what they need is everybody's business. It's my business. It's this council's business. It's the county's business. But in terms of processes, and the lion's share of the funding, I also would be curious to get some sense as to where the county is on this, as to what they're going to put in light of everything that Council Caballero and Councilor Reese have said. With that said, however, I very much am eager to support and stand these centers up as soon as possible. I think Ms. Agbayu is spot on with her admonitions about the importance of time and the urgency of this hour. So with that said, I look forward to supporting it, but I would like some information regarding the county as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank all of you.
Thank you, Council Member. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to ask a couple of COVID safety questions as well. We shut down the schools because we deemed it was unsafe for children to gather in person, and now we are talking about children gathering in person. So just wondering what the protocols are that y'all are thinking about in order to make sure that this doesn't turn into, you know, kids getting COVID. The other piece I wanted to mention, I feel comfortable, you know, the issues around space, though DPS, I mean, I think DPS has the most space. We go to DPS for space all the time, but any city space that is available, I feel, you know, very comfortable with city space being used for this program. I think that the question of funding, you know, again, I agree with my colleagues that this should be funded by the county. The fact that the money is being passed through from the county, I honestly didn't think we would get any CARES money from the county once I found out that we weren't going to get any direct money and that the money was going to go from federal to state to municipalities. I just assumed that the county would keep it all and wouldn't give us any at all until that rule was passed that they had to give 25% to municipalities. It feels like the intention of that 25% to municipalities is to serve municipal functions. The majority of it is staying with the county to serve county functions, and they could entirely fund this program with the CARES Act money that they are getting and that they are able to keep. On a broader perspective, right, I feel like we run into this question all the time of like, what's a city function and what's a county function and who's funding what. And because there's some overlap, but overall because the missions of the organization are the same, just to, you know, provide the best quality of life for the Durham community. And so sometimes we get into these conversations about who should fund what, and it feels a little bit like splitting hairs and like, this is unnecessary. Why don't we just, you know, that whoever has the funding should fund it. At the same time, I feel like as a city council member, that it's our primary responsibility to fund and provide for the things that are actually designated to us as municipal functions. And that if the county doesn't have enough money to meet the educational needs of the students of Durham, the county needs to raise taxes and raise that money in order to fully fund the schools and in order to meet that need. That responsibility shouldn't fall on the municipality. It should be the county's responsibility to figure out how that's going to happen. So I expect that the county would fully fund this program. They have the funding. It's a great program, and I would be very happy to support it with other city resources. The other option that I was thinking about was that maybe it makes sense, since all this money is coming to us as CARES money pass through, and we share goals with the county and the school district, obviously, with regard to how we use this money to ensure the safety and well-being of people in our community. Maybe some sort of like coalition effort where we all get together and talk about how all of the money gets spent as the three governments make sense. Like, look at all the CARES money as a pot and figure out how to allocate it across all of the needs in the city and the county and the school district, rather than each of us trying to figure out how to use our bit of money to fund our bit of responsibility. So that's a suggestion for people to think about. Outside of that, I would expect, like, if we continue to, we're just going to fund what we're supposed to fund, I would expect the county to fund this proposal and for us to be asked for, to come in around the edges, like with resources like space, for example. But anyway, wanted to express that, and also to get people's thoughts on having some sort of like CARES funding conference committee that would be multi-government and work together to figure all this stuff out.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I really appreciate council members and Mayor Pro Tem sharing all of those comments. I think they covered most of the gambit of my questions and also made me think about a couple of other things. I really appreciated Councilmember Reese's kind of clear, concise way of explaining, like there's some overlap, but there's not. And then I just wanted to add to the conversation and just acknowledging that those things that municipal government covers aren't as sexy as education all the time. But I do think there are areas that we, like as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, around space, which is very much a part of what this proposal is requesting. But I do want to step back and just note that the way that this is coming forward is off-putting, and acknowledging that in the work session, this is kind of fast. I'm still trying to figure out where the document is, and I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's included in the agenda or what have you, but it wasn't made public for everyone to see. And so that definitely is always an issue for me. I know that there is, and you gotta excuse, I know there's a class going on in the background if you hear it. There's a number of concerns, because I do know that as a employee of Durham Children's Initiative, we've had this conversation internally, and I know that it's caused a lot of strife and a lot of debate, because there are a lot of concerns around bringing any children together. And so I know the DCI backed away from any conversation about bringing any kids together for the first 9 weeks, at the very least, based on professional or pretty much medical professionals' advice, acknowledging that pulling kids together who are more often than not in the homes of parents who are most likely to be the essential workers, and often people of color who disproportionately have been impacted by COVID very differently. All of the health concerns raised lots of red flags for me. So unlike Councilmember Middleton, I do have some concerns about how you implement and where they're implemented. And so I'd love to have a lot more conversations about those details. I know that the premise and the idea and the time and the effort that's been put into this work is coming from a place of acknowledging just how much was missing pre-COVID, and noting that in COVID, those things are highlighted. This is not an issue that we're trying to solve because it just sprang up. It's been going on. Children of color in our community have been disproportionately doing horrible in school, and that's across country. I know that this work has to be done. How it gets done is important to me, and making sure that there's more people at the table than just nonprofit organizations is important, because I think that the parents' voice needs to be in it. So I know when I spoke directly to Ms. Zagbayou, I asked about the numbers and acknowledging that how many people are exactly asking for this. And so I appreciate Ms. Hardy mentioning that they were doing kind of an on-demand kind of assessment, and acknowledging that as you increased based on demand, that's more of how I would love to see this move. And there are, I mean, there's just so many things going through my mind at this point, because it's just coming to me. And so I'm just kind of trying to pull all the pieces together and acknowledging that all of the things that are being said, there are good parts and there are things that are missing. I would love to have further conversation. I would really appreciate if this was something that did come through the Recovery Task Force, acknowledging that they are having those conversations regularly every Friday. And I think that should be a good resource to kind of go through some of this information. I'd love to hear their recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reese.
Mr. Mayor, I know you have yet to talk about this, and I want to hear from you, but I did just want to add one or two other things from listening to my colleagues. First of all, I do believe that this is a project that needs to go forward. Outside of my role as a member of the City Council, I'm also a member of this community. I'm the parent of 2 DPS kids right now. And my wife and I understand that this is one of the most important things that our community can come together around to support families who aren't in the same situation that our family is. You know, I can take these meetings from our basement. My wife can do her video calls for her work actually right here in the same space. I kicked her out at a little before 1 so that I could do this meeting. But we're very, very fortunate to be able to do that, and to be able to answer tech support questions from our kids if they come through the door not able to connect to their next Zoom for the next class. but so many parents in our community aren't that fortunate to be able to do that. And so something like the Hope Centers has to happen. And the reason that I can tell you it's important is because my wife and I will make our largest charitable contribution of the year to any organization to this specific work, between this and our family business. That's how important this is to our family. At the same time, I sit not just as a member of this community and a DPS parent who wants this work to go forward and is willing to move heaven and earth to make it happen. I also sit as a member of the Durham City Council. And as in that role, I have certain responsibilities to the city, to the taxpayers who fund it, and to the very critical service work that we have to do every single day in this community. And so that is the sort of the animating force behind the questions that I've asked about the city's role in this specific program. Not because I think it's a bad idea or because I think it shouldn't happen. It absolutely should. My wife and I are doing everything we can and then some to make it happen. But as a member of the city council, I have certain obligations that require me to ask these kinds of questions and to point out some of the problems that I see in the funding proposal that has come to us. Having said all that, obviously all of my colleagues have said that we want to wait and hear what the county says. I think that's a great idea. I think we ought to do that. But ultimately, I think the council has to be ready for the county commission to accept the proposal made by the foundation, and then we're going to come together as a council in, I don't know, 3 or 4 days somehow before the August 28th deadline and be asked about this again. And so that's just a reality we're going to have to face, and I just want to put that out there for everybody. None of this is to take away from the incredible effort that's gone to getting this proposal to where it is today. As I said, I think it's a great proposal, and my family is fully behind it. But I think we do have some questions as a city to answer about how much funding we can give it, where that money is going to come from, and perhaps more to the point, what we're not going to do that we're supposed to be doing with that money if it can't come from the $2.9 million of the CARES Act funding. Those are all questions that I'm not prepared to answer today, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Other comments, colleagues at this point, or questions? Mr. Perry, yes.
Thank you, Mayor Schul. Just wanted to address, because a couple of individuals referenced it. Mayor Pro Tem, I think, began this, the question regarding safety. And this is longer and more complex than I think we want to go into today. But what I would share with you is that in March, when schools closed, the YMCA and other organizations moved to begin working in a space of providing childcare for essential workers. And since March, we have continued to do in-person care for children in this community, both here in Durham and throughout the Triangle, and really at a national level as a YMCA. The risk of COVID are very real, but we have worked very closely with the Recovery and Renewal Task Force, with the Youth Activities Roundtable, with Dr. Akambayo from Duke through that work, to ensure that we are doing everything possible to mitigate those risks to the greatest degree possible. And admittedly have had a very successful season over the past 6 months of bringing children into our space, following guidelines most predominantly set forth by North Carolina DHHS, but also here with the Durham County Health Department and other entities. And we take those guidelines and protocol very seriously. So what I would offer is for council members that may have concerns about the safety or the management or the operational side of these programs, again, we are beginning to operate some of these locally next week. I'd invite you to come and see those programs. I'd be happy to speak with you over the phone to kind of walk through the detail of how we do our best to work with state and local leaders to mitigate those risks. But I did want to acknowledge the safety concerns are very real. And as an operator, it is something that we take very seriously in both the programs we've been running, but also as we prepare to implement and move forward with these programs as well.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask Dr. Hardy another question. Dr. Hardy, um, are you all considering opening more schools depending upon the enrollment request for the learning centers? I wasn't clear if that was on the table still or what your thinking was about that.
Thank you, Mayor Schul. Our primary focus is to make sure that we are up and running with the 6 sites and the 900 slots that we currently have, as well as making sure that we are continuing. It's been great to hear from many of the parents and some of the Zoom lessons that I'm sure are happening in the background, that we are also providing safe spaces for our teachers and other instructional staff that are working really, really hard to provide engaging virtual lessons so that they can have access to their classrooms. We're going to carefully monitor the application process and work very closely with our partners. We do want to make sure that those 3,000 slots are available across the city and county of Durham, and we're committed to doing everything we can to continue that effort.
Thank you very much. I'll just throw out a few things that are on my mind as I listen to my colleagues and to you all who presented. I want to thank you. First of all, Dr. Hardy, I know how hard this is for you all. Maybe I don't, but I think I can imagine. And it's one of these situations I know with school where there's no good answer. You all are making the best choice among some very, very hard, not such great choices to. And I know you're doing your best to make the best choice. And I just want to know that you have my support and you have our community support. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues who are having this meeting and with their children having lessons in the background. I am not. I am desirous of a grilled cheese sandwich. But I did miss lunch, but I am not worrying about my kids having to get an education during this difficult time. And so just again, want to appreciate all the parents who are dealing with that. And again, it's very hard to imagine how difficult that is. So I know that this proposal came to us out of a sense of urgency, and I think we all recognize that the cake is not fully baked here, but it is the kind of thing we've been having to do so often in the last 5 months. We've been having someone use the word pivot. Yeah, we've had to pivot a lot, and we've had to spend money with the rapidity that we're not used to in government, and we're being asked to do that again. And I don't think that will be an obstacle for us if we feel like it's money that we need to spend. I do want to point out that in the proposal that we have for our CARES Act funding, $1.2 million, and it sounds like now probably $1.4 million will be going to wire DHA properties for students to have access to online learning in a way that will be a years-long investment, a 10 or 20 year long investment. It won't just be for them, but it could be for their parents who, whatever their parents are doing at home as well. And this investment is a huge priority for us. It serves so many of the needs of our students going forward. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen as quickly as we would like it to happen. But I do want to just mention that as an enormous city contribution to this work. And I'm really, really pleased with that part of this budget. I know that Laura Khalil and Durham Parks and Rec folks have been involved in thinking about the Hope Centers. And I agree that it would be important to know what contributions of space Durham Parks and Rec can make. And I'm sure that those discussions are happening. I think just to describe what I think the situation is generally with the funding, We have a $5 million local COVID response fund, of which $1 million has already been committed through our small business program. And we know that during the next year, that has not just to cover community needs, but also the needs of our city government. We don't know exactly what our tax shortfall is going to be. We've projected it, but if things get worse, that COVID response fund is there for that. It's not something we can just spend all of. On the other hand, we know that it is there and available for purposes like this, and I would certainly consider that for this funding. I think that given what Ms. Johnson said about our discussions with Jody Miller, I don't see us trying to get that funding into this CARES Act money. And besides which, I really like our priorities. Half of this money, as I said, is already going to wiring DHA properties, and I think that's really the right priority. The county has spent a lot of its CARES money already and committed a lot of it already, but a lot of that is also FEMA reimbursable. Or they've spent a lot of money for things which are FEMA reimbursable. And so I think, in discussions with the county, I think it would be good to try to sort that out with them. What's the true availability of the funds that they have? I know they've spent a lot of money, but I also know a lot of it will be reimbursable to them. And so are there, given that, are there local resources that they can involve? Normally, I would say, as my colleagues have said very eloquently, this is a county job. It definitely is a county job, and it needs to be primarily a county job. The reason that I would think differently now in terms of us giving it support is that we're in an unprecedented emergency, and we've been spending money on our health ambassadors that we're funding through this as well. Super crucial, and I would not normally support funding that. I consider that also to be a county function, but we're in unprecedented times. And so I think, I will just say, I would be happy to be supportive of some level of funding from the city once we know a little bit more information. And my colleagues have very eloquently said and effectively said what they were looking for. So I'll just, I think that's it for me. And Ms. Gonzalez-Smith, would you like to make any final comments?
I think I'd just like to ask a final question around what would be most helpful for us to, we can follow up on Tuesday after we see how the county meeting goes on Monday. That makes complete sense. And would just like some input from you all on what a timeline could look like and re-engaging this conversation after that county meeting, given the urgency that we're working toward too, and knowing you all don't have a regular meeting until early September, I believe, and our goal is to, for the partners to be able to open some of these centers by September 8th. So just a little bit of guidance on y'all's timeline and how we can provide good information along the way.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that given the reality that we're in, the CARES money is not going to be an option. I don't see that, given what staff has told us, given our very tight timeline with the county. So there's no need to sort of do this in the next 3 days. Let me put it like that. And you're right, we don't have a regular meeting, I believe, until September 8th. We do have some special meetings planned for the selection of a new city council member. I believe that this item could be added to that. It would have to be advertised as such. So I'll be checking in with our city clerk and listening to my colleagues also about their desires to do that. So I think once you hear back from the county, it would be useful if you would let us know what they say. And then any other further information we can get from Durham Public Schools. I mean, I think that the meals waiver is a huge issue. And so any information that we can get to help us understand this would be great. We have special meetings on, let's see, Councilmember Reese can maybe help me here. When are our special meetings, council member?
Yeah, give me one moment, Mr. Mayor. I'm pulling that up right now. Somehow, unfortunately, those do not make it on my calendar, which they really should.
Mr. Mayor, I can fill you in on that.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You have special meetings scheduled for the 24th, the 27th, and the 31st. The meetings on the 24th and 31st start at 10:15 and run 1 hour. The meeting on the 27th starts at 5 p.m.
Thank you. I can tell you that the meeting on the 24th is not an option because of council member schedules, and we've deliberately held that to a 1 hour meeting. So I would think that the best meeting then would probably be the 27th. That's a 5 o'clock meeting of the council. That would give us time to advertise. Should we, Madam Clerk, is that correct? Should we decide early next week that we wanted to add this to the agenda?
That is correct. We would have to re-advertise, yes.
Okay. So I think that would be my suggestion, is that you all think about that as a timeline. Councilmember Caballero, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just a question, because we know that some of the things are moving in general on the plan and it's due to the county on the 28th. Could we take an opportunity to get an update from staff, or is that not an option?
Sure.
I just wanted,
Yes.
I know that there's lots of open questions, and it would be great to know what the final product is that's going to county before the due date. And since we're going to be meeting about this, can we kind of,
you're talking about
for the CARES money
Act.
period, correct?
Yeah, you're talking about the CARES Act funding.
Yes, Mayor.
Yeah. Madam Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, what we were hoping that would happen here today, based upon the timeline, is that the adjustments that Ms. Johnson spoke about regarding the Health Ambassadors Program and the eligibility of some of those costs, along with an adjustment to the DHA campus networks, which we hope to include all nine of the properties at DHA that actually have students, that we would submit our initial plan in order to make that deadline of August 28th with those changes. Certainly we would submit a new attachment prior to the council meeting, but go ahead and submit that, realizing that if there is a significant difference that needs to take place after that, we could give it consideration, but just to stay on a timeline to get this plan to the county by the 28th so that they can make the deadlines that they actually have to access the funds.
Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. Just so I understand, the portion of the ambassadors program that isn't allowable, where basically the difference is being made on the DHA property project, which I understand. The original program was basically a 50-50 split between the city and the county. On Monday, the county is going to determine if they're going to approve their 50% share, but that still leaves a gap in the program. And so I guess what I'm asking, is there a thought that that gap would be covered by the city-only COVID money? Because if that's the case, and then we're also telling the folks with the Hope Centers, we know CARES money can't be used on their project, it could be potentially a portion could be funded out of the leftover COVID money. It feels like I'm going to need a clearer understanding of money, period, before. So if we're having this conversation about the Hope Centers on Thursday of next week, that we would have a conversation about any outstanding item that the CARES money did not cover. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
I think you've made yourself clear, Ms. Johnson.
I was just going to say, it's my understanding that this council wanted to proceed with funding the Health Ambassadors Program. And so the additional $234,000 we were proposing taking from our COVID-19 fund, which now has a balance of $4 million. So we would take that amount out, assuming that the county would share in the cost of the program by providing the $89,000 that's needed. That is the $89,000 cost, which is less than what we originally thought. So that is, so to DCM Page's comments, our proposal is that we make that adjustment in this plan, and we will attach the adjusted plan to the agenda item, but we would go ahead and send the plan to Durham County. They requested it by August 28th because they have to review it and have the full plan, their funding and our funding, to the state by September 1st. We have until September 15th to adjust the plan, which they will discuss at their September 8th. So we still have time to adjust the plan. We need to get the initial plan into the county, because the rules say that if we do not submit on time, the county can retain the funding for their own use.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. That was a good, very important clarification. Thank you, Council Member, and thank you, Ms. Johnson. Colleagues, I want to first thank our guests today. Thank you for being here, Dr. Hardy, Mr. Perry, Ms. Zagbayu, Ms. Gonzalez-Smith. We appreciate you, and we appreciate what you're doing. We know how important it is, and I just want to express again the gratitude that my colleagues have expressed. And I think you have a pretty good understanding now of our timeline, and I'm happy to talk about that on the phone anytime. And so we'll work to figure it out, and we'll talk to. If we hear, once we know something early next week, the clerk will have time to re-advertise our meeting for Thursday the 27th, which is a 5 o'clock meeting. And let me just also then clarify, colleagues, I just think it's important to note with the question that Councilmember Caballero asked, we are being asked today to give our approval to the administration to go ahead and submit this CARES Act funding, because we don't meet again for an action on this until after the deadline. And so the proposal we're being asked is, I think we're all clear about it, is that what was in the agenda memo, with the exception of the money that is not, I think $234,000, which was not eligible potentially for this CARES Act funding, will come instead of our local COVID funding, and will be replaced in the CARES Act funding with additional funding for the DHA project to wire the homes to wire the DHA communities, the 9 communities where there are students. Is everybody good with that? We don't need a formal motion, but I'm seeing thumbs. Okay, great. I'm seeing all thumbs. Super. Madam Manager and Ms. Johnson, is that what you need?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, that's what we need. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you to our guests. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. That took a little longer than we might have expected. Welcome to the COVID age in the Durham City Council. And now we will move on to, we have some presentations. And I am at a first presentation, I believe, is the update on the Durham County Transit Plan. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Aaron Kane with the DCHCMPO, and I believe we have some slides, if they can be brought up. Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, fantastic. Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, member of the council, thank you for taking the time. This is, as we promised last week, I'm sorry, not last week, last winter, we would give you a quarterly update as to where we are with the development of the Durham County Transit Plan. So just wanted to give you a brief update and then leave it open to questions. As you can see there, our newly designed logo for the Durham Transit Plan that we'll be using on all of our materials going forward. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you.
Aaron,
this is gonna be,
excuse me a second.
Sure.
Before we get going, I know that we have a guest here that our colleagues have not met and I think would be important to introduce, which is Mr. Chuck Latuka, our new Go Triangle, our new president and CEO of Go Triangle. And so I had talked to Chuck before the meeting and asked if he would just take a minute to introduce himself. So before we do this, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if Mr. Latuka could make himself available and introduce himself to my colleagues.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I don't think my video is enabled yet, but thank you for recognizing me, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak to the council for a minute to introduce myself. Since we are in the, oh, here I go. Here comes my video. Thank you. So since we are now in COVID age, and it is harder and harder to meet folks, I've been the president of Go Triangle for since April 20th, and I recently moved down here at very end of April, and have been enjoying my new position and trying to meet people. And I wanted to take the opportunity, and I appreciate the mayor giving me a minute to say, you know, who I am, and we look forward to our presentation later in this meeting here, I think after Aaron's done, to talk about the commuter rail project, which has a lot of interesting, I think, challenges and opportunities for the city of Durham. But I just want to make myself known, and also say that I'm available for any meetings. If any of the council members want to meet with me one-on-one or do a call or video, I'd be happy to do that and make myself available. I've got a chance to meet several people that are on this call right now. Of course, the mayor, who sits on our board, we've enjoyed a good working relationship together. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and allowing me just to say hello.
Thank you very much, Chuck. We're Mr. Latuka. We're really glad to have you. You're going to do a super job at Go Triangle. Your experience is amazing in project delivery and in service, and we're just really glad to have you. And thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you, and I'll be happy to help Catherine after the commuter rail answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. All right, Aaron. Apologies to you.
No worries. No worries at all. So as we're doing introductions, I'll go ahead and introduce a couple of more folks that we have with us today. That you may go ahead and go to the next slide, that you may not have met yet. Brooke Ganser is serving as our deputy project manager for this. She's with the City County Planning Department. So she'll be going through some of this presentation today, as well as Allison Fluitt from Kinley Horn. She is the consultant project manager on this project. So I wanted to give a chance to introduce her as well. Also with us today are Sean Egan, your transportation director, who serves on our leadership team, as well as Catherine Eggleston of Go Triangle, who also serves on our leadership team. So this effort is truly multi-agency, multi-departmental, and we have a lot of people coming together to put together a quality product. Next slide, please. So you may recall back when we spoke to you in the wintertime that this was primarily being staff-driven at that time. We didn't have Kinley Horn or any of their sub-consultants on board yet, but once we were able to bring them on board in the late spring, we did some reconfiguring of our staff and our organizational structure. So I just want to make sure you all are aware of how we're now structured. We do have a core technical team that meets every other week. We've got representatives from transportation, the MPO, planning, TJ Cog, Go Triangle, and the city, all coming together to review our work product, review how we're going so far, and make sure they're guiding us in the right direction. We also have a technical team and an outreach team that meet at least once a month, if not more often, that we can bounce ideas off of, provide us technical expertise on transit-related issues, as well as make sure we, especially in times of COVID, as I'm sure you're aware, can get out into the community as much as possible and get the input that we need, especially from those communities that in the past have not been heard as much as we'd like. And then finally, we do have a leadership team consisting of representatives from the MPO, Go Triangle, the county, planning, and the city that we can, again, provide us leadership, provide us guidance, and make sure that we're going in the right direction as we move forward. Next slide, please. So if we've been able to get Kinley Horn on board, I just wanted to update you on our current schedule for where we're going. We've pretty much completed kickoff, and we're working on data gathering right now. We've completed our work plan and our public engagement plan. Both of those were provided to you for your review. We are now getting ready to go out with goals and objectives. These, and Brooke's going to talk about this a little more, these were these are going to be based on comments that we got through our outreach that we did from November of 2019 through February of 2020. We want to take those back out to the community, get feedback, get input on that. That's going to be coming up very soon. We'll use those to develop our scenarios that we'll take back to the community probably around January or so. Get feedback from that, and then use that to develop our final version of the our final preferred scenario in the spring. And with that, I will turn it over to Brooke to talk about how we did our engagement previously and how we're looking to do it going forward.
Thank you, Aaron. Next slide, please. So our draft goals and objectives, as Aaron mentioned previously, were formed using community insight and comments from the listening and learning community workshops, online survey, and engagement ambassador sessions. Additionally, we used input from the idea collection phase of the City of Durham's first cycle of participatory budgeting and resident focus groups. And so to determine preliminary goals, staff actually assigned themes to all transit-related comments, and these themes included things like improving frequency, affordability, connectivity to bus stops, and improving regional connectivity, to just name a few. An insight analysis was then done to cluster the comments and formulate how might we statements that were eventually turned into draft goal statements. And this picture shows our how might we statements and comment clusters on sticky notes. Next slide, please. So there are currently a lot of transportation related plans happening across Durham that our team is working to better coordinate the transit plans efforts with. So we are also working on a coordination document which includes a brief summary of each of these plans, how they are related, and different ways to get involved for each one. And this information will be available online on our website to the public. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our next phase of engagement will be for preliminary goal setting. Our objective is to raise awareness of the Durham Transit Plan, gain project support, and receive input in project goals and objectives. And these are just a few of our engagement methods that we are planning to conduct. Durham Transit Plan committee meetings, a narrated presentation that will be on our website as well. We will be pushing out our project website more fully and broadly. We are also working on a survey that will be available online and also printed. Various stakeholder outreach. We'll be using the engagement ambassadors again for this phase of engagement, and then just e-blasts and social media as well. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand it over to Allison Fluitt with Kimley Horn to talk about our comprehensive operational analysis.
Thank you, Brooke. So as Aaron and Brooke have mentioned to you, there are a lot of different moving parts that comprise the Durham County Transit Master Plan. And one of the things that came to our attention very early on was to include a comprehensive operational analysis as a component of this master planning effort. So this is essentially something that allows us to dig into the operations of our transit system, and really will serve as a complement to the recommendations that are put forth as the remainder of the Durham Transit Plan. So this is a fairly significant task in and of itself, and so it has had its own kickoff meeting, which was conducted in late June, and has been paired with an initial data gathering effort. We've had strong partnership from Sean Egan and others at the city, as well as with Go Triangle and Go Durham as a part of this effort. And we will be moving quickly into a peer system analysis as well as document review. And with that, we appreciate the opportunity to present with you all today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fluitt, Ms. Ganser, and Mr. Kane. We appreciate you all being here for this presentation. And now I'll ask if colleagues have any questions for the team. Anybody? All right. Well, I think the last discussion must have worn us out. Oh, okay. Good. I think we're good.
I think it looks great.
All right. Good. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're looking forward to further reports and further progress, and very excited about it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
He looks great to me as well, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, everybody. All right, we'll now move to our next item, which is another transportation item, and that is the commuter rail. Just pull it up here and yeah, the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail update.
Hi, this is Catherine Eggleston, Chief Development Officer with Go Triangle. Good afternoon. We have just a few slides here for a brief update on our study activities so far. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the commuter rail project is currently envisioned would run within the existing North Carolina Railroad corridor, which you're familiar with, runs through central Durham. It's the purple line displayed on the screen here. It's just one element of the county plans in Durham and Wake, in addition to expansion of bus service, expanded bus facilities, as well as bus rapid transit projects in Wake County, as well as one in Orange County. So it would be part of a larger regional transit system if it continues to be part of our plans moving forward. Next slide, please. You may recall that over the last phase of our work on this project, we were looking at a potential study area as wide as Mebane to Selma, or the edge of Alamance County into the heart of Johnston County through the Greater Triangle region. The first phase of study that wrapped up earlier this year was primarily looking at identifying potential phase 1 projects that could be eligible for federal funding to be a part of the upfront capital investment for the project. So we identified 2 potential initial segments out of that first phase of study that could be eligible for federal funding. That's a Durham to Garner phase 1 or a Durham to Clayton phase 1. So that's what you see highlighted on the screen will be the narrowed study area as part of this second phase of work, highlighted between these kind of salmon colored dots here. So this phase of study is funded by the Durham and Wake County Transit Plans, as well as some funding from Johnston County looking at that Clayton piece. Next slide, please. So for the current study, there's a lot of work that will be ongoing over the next year to 18 months, boiling it down to kind of 3 high-level categories of work. The first will be to engage the community, to share information about the study and get feedback from the public. We're envisioning right now 3 public comment periods for the study throughout the course of the study. One coming up here very soon, potentially next month, getting that kicked off. That will be primarily focused on education as well as getting input on the overall project metrics that we'll be looking at. And then 2 additional comment periods later on in the study once we have some of the study deliverables to be able to share for public feedback, targeting those about midway through and then towards the end of the study prior to any decision making. The second major category of work will be to work with the railroad owner, that's North Carolina Railroad Company, and the railroad operators, which is primarily Norfolk Southern. We also have a little segment of the corridor in Wake County that's operated on by CSX, working with those railroad companies to confirm the infrastructure improvements and construction that would be needed to support commuter rail service being added to this corridor, which, as you know, has existing freight and intercity passenger service. And then lastly, we will be evaluating major engineering challenges in the corridor, as well as potential project benefits, such as economic development study, study of traffic congestion relief, potential environmental benefits, that type of thing, and potential environmental burdens. On the next slide, please. So for the engineering challenges, as you all are likely familiar, downtown Durham has been identified as one of those key areas that we really want to take a deliberate look at upfront here in order to understand risks. And when I say risks, I mean both from the standpoint of cost to the project as well as the viability of the project. We want to ensure that there's a solution to adding additional tracks through downtown Durham that can be supported by yourselves, by the community, and by other decision makers. So the general geographic scope of this, this sub-study, as we're calling it, is what you see on the screen here. The purple highlight is the existing rail line through downtown. So as part of this study, we'll be doing a high-level environmental screening. We'll be doing preliminary work on track design, station siting, and some other engineering disciplines for a few concepts. And then we'll also be working on a stakeholder and community engagement component for this study specifically. What we're envisioning to get that started would be a kickoff meeting with City of Durham staff. We're working with Sean Egan to get that scheduled, hopefully early next month. And we would also include Downtown Durham Inc. and Duke University to participate in that, that kickoff meeting to identify the preliminary concepts that we would look at across this range of engineering disciplines. And then we would have further workshops and public engagement as we proceed through the study and have some outputs of that engineering analysis to be able to share. And we would, of course, update this body as you would like during the course of that study. So this work is programmed to occur over the upcoming year, kicking off here very shortly with some tie-in with the work that we'll be doing with the railroads later on in the course of the study. And that's the last prepared slide that we have here. On the next slide, just questions and comments. I'll stop there. I just wanted to keep it brief here, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Ms. Eggleston. Appreciate it. Colleagues, questions, comments? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I know that this work is a long ways off, and just making sure that the equitable engagement team is involved in this, because I didn't hear them mentioned and I didn't see it in the presentation as well.
Yeah, so we are working closely with Aaron Kane and Brooke, who just talked through the work that's being done around the transit plan for engagement and equitable engagement. I actually have a meeting with Aaron tomorrow to talk about the logistics of coordinating and aligning the engagement work that we're planning for the study with the engagement that will be done for the transit plan for this first round.
Yeah, let me add to that. I actually saw a note on my agenda that I had forgotten from the previous item. The engagement ambassador's presentation on the previous item was really awesome. It's very exciting to see how the ambassadors are reaching so many African-American people as we wanted, and very different from the workshops and online surveys. It was interesting to see that in the presentation. So to just second what Councilmember Freeman said, that's so important. It was disappointing in that work to see we weren't still reaching a proportionate share of our Latinx population, but appreciated that being highlighted, and know that there will be ongoing work on that. And I'm glad to hear, Ms. Eggleston, that you'll be working with that team. Other colleagues, other questions? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Catherine, thank you for the presentation. This is the second time I've seen it now, and it just keeps getting better. Actually, it's the same one I saw last week. So I want to say two things. First of all, I look forward to a robust community engagement process around this project. I have said previously that this project has an incredibly low profile in the city of Durham. We were in a meeting together, Catherine, of our two area MPOs last year, or maybe it was early this year, and someone said, what are people saying in your community about the commuter rail project? And I believe I said something along the lines of, if you walk down the street in Durham, downtown Durham, and ask 10 people what they thought of the commuter rail project, the answer all 10 of them would give you was, I have no idea what you're talking about, but can we get better bus service in the city of Durham? So that to me, not the community engagement is important to find out kind of what folks want, what they think would be helpful to them, how this project can be integrated into the physical space of our city in a way that doesn't cause significant problems. Lots of questions that I think community engagement can help us to answer. But perhaps more importantly, telling people that this project exists and is coming down the tracks, as it were, is super important. Because until folks get engaged with the reality of this project, I think a lot of what we're doing is just drawing lines on maps. The second thing I wanted to say, and this is, I know you understand this, Catherine, so this is largely for my colleagues, I guess, is to my mind, the most critical question about this project is how much is Durham going to pay for it? The cost share agreement that we have to reach with Wake County to build this project is the single most important factor in determining whether or not this should go forward, in my opinion. For better or worse, we don't get a vote in that process. That the county's going to decide that in negotiations with Wake County as they determine funding priorities in the Durham County Transit Plan. But to my mind, that conversation has to leave sufficient resources in the Durham County Transit Plan to fund a robust transit system right here in the city of Durham for the folks who need it the most. And like I said, even though I don't get a vote in that process, I and I hope all of us will be very loud voices in that conversation because our priority has to be building and maintaining that robust transit system right here in Durham. The Go Durham bus system has huge needs that we're not going to be able to fund without significant resources from the Durham County Transit Plan. And so that cost share is critically important, and I want all of us to keep our eyes on that ball as this project heads into the station. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great point. And to that point, Ms. Eggleston, I read today maybe in the paper about Wake County's, because of the diminished sales tax collection that they're expecting for their transit plan, that they are already anticipating pushing back a couple of the BRTs and the commuter rail project in terms of construction time a couple of years, and wanted to know if you could just comment on that and what you see ahead in that regard.
Sure, absolutely. So how I would characterize that work, and Go Triangle has been fairly involved with Campo and Wake County in their process to update the Wake Vision Plan, which is the Wake County equivalent of the Durham Transit Plan. So what they're saying there is that the original Wake Transit Plan was for a 10-year period, 2017 to 2027. And we're now about 3-4 years past the origin of that plan. So there was planned to be an effort to update that plan and extend the plan out to 2030. So have a plan that's from 2020 to 2030 coming out of this process. What was originally expected was that there would be additional revenues available. So there would be more projects able to be programmed in that tail end of that updated 10-year period. But given the realities of the pandemic and the lower revenue projections coming out of that, what we're seeing in the scenarios on the Wake side is that rather than having additional funds to do new projects, we're just looking at reprogramming the existing plan out over that longer time frame, if that makes sense.
That was helpful. Thank you very much. And I want to also say that I think you've identified really well what are some of our threshold issues, the engineering issues through downtown Durham. They've got to be solved. You've talked about the relationship with the railroads. We know from our experience with the light rail, they have to be solved and solved early. And then there's the issue of ridership and projected ridership. And I think that's also very much, that's an issue. I know that why don't you talk about ridership projections and the ongoing, and the study that we're undergoing at this point?
Sure, absolutely. So as you may recall, as part of the earlier phase of study, we did some very high level ridership projections comparing the different potential projects, the Mebane to Selma against the Durham to Garner, kind of at a very high level of what the overall system ridership might be for that. And that, if I recall, was sort of in the range of 10,000 riders a day for the Durham Garner segment for the 2030 horizon year. We understand, based on the feedback we received from this body as well as others at that time, that there's an interest in this subsequent phase of study, looking at that in more detail, looking at where those trips are being made, where people are getting on the system, where they're going to, how much of that ridership is originating in Durham, is going to destinations in Durham, as well as what are the demographic characteristics of the projected riders on the system. So that more detailed analysis, looking at the geographic breakdown as well as stratifying by race, income, and other characteristics. Those are elements that we've included in the scope of what we'll be doing for this upcoming phase to be able to provide that more detailed breakdown of the analysis. And so those deliverables are scheduled over the upcoming year. We should have, at the midpoint of the study, should have some preliminary analysis available to share as we work to update that ridership. We're also updating those ridership projections in coordination with the MPOs and the Triangle J Council of Governments as they update the housing and jobs projections for the upcoming update to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So we're ensuring that we have the latest base data to use for that for those projection models.
Thank you very much. Other questions, colleagues? Well, Ms. Eggleston, Mr. Latuka, thank you so much. We're excited about the next phases of this, and we've got the right project manager. I just want to say that, having worked with Ms. Eggleston previously very closely, I have tremendous confidence in your ability to get this job done. And I appreciate all the questions that have been raised, and looking forward to what's next. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I'm going to move the presentation on the tax deferral up because I've heard from Deputy City Manager Page that Dwayne Brinson, who's here with us from the county, is going to have to leave at 3:30, and would like for him to be able to be at the beginning of this discussion. And I apologize to our law enforcement folks who I know are waiting, and but I think we really need to hear from Mr. Brinson. And Mr. Brinson, thank you. We appreciate you sticking with us this long this afternoon and being with us.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Dwayne Brinson, Durham County Tax Administrator. Have a couple of colleagues with me today. I don't see their camera on, but Deputy Tax Administrator Teresa Hairston is with us, as well as the Division Manager over the tax relief area, Amanda Markle. They are both with us today. I presented this to the council and the commissioners last week at the joint meeting. I'm going to present it again. I'm excited that we were able to find ways to address the ever-increasing taxes in Durham. And today, if we can go to the next slide, today I'm going to talk to you about the three options that the commissioners have approved. The first being the long-term homeowner tax deferment program. The second being the bolstering of the Durham Community Land Trust program. And the last one being expanding the housing repair program. And after that, we'll have an opportunity for discussions and questions. Next slide, please. First and foremost, all the way back in August, just after I joined Durham County, the first joint meeting I was a part of, I mentioned that we would work on a tax assistance evaluator tool, which basically condenses a multi-page legal application into just a few questions that taxpayers can go online and answer. And it'll tell them right then and there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if they qualify for any of the most three popular programs. And these are the big three, as I call them. the homestead exemption, the circuit breaker deferment, and the disabled veteran exclusion. Now, the next slide is actually a snapshot, a screenshot of this evaluator. It is on our website. I would encourage anybody watching this meeting to go out there, test it out, share it widely. We want this to be known. We don't want someone that may qualify for a relief program to not be getting it because they don't know. And that's the beauty of this. It can be easily shared and it's very easy to fill out. And you can see here, this, like I said, it condenses a very legal application into just a few questions and with predefined answers. So we've simplified it and made it available 24/7 so that we can put it in libraries and community centers and share it very easily. So I'm excited to announce this. Next slide, please. So this is the program that I'll spend most of the time on today. This is you all probably are familiar with the proposal put forward by the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit. That proposal was a program that allowed low-income population to pay a percentage of their income in taxes. And the remainder, the gap between what they pay and the full tax bill, would be covered by a participating jurisdiction, County of Durham, City of Durham. I heard legal concerns about that program. So what I wanted to do was to go back to my board, to the council, with an option that is legal. And basically that is what this program is. It essentially takes the coalition's proposal and it eliminates any legal concern from that proposal. The basics of this program is much of the same as the coalition's proposal. It focuses on the population earning 30% or less of AMI in household income, and it's a perpetual payment plan. The qualifying household would be able to pay only 4% of their annual household income towards property taxes. And this is comparable to the circuit breaker deferment. The circuit breaker deferment is the only other income-driven tax relief program, meaning that it's calculated what you pay is based on your income. Circuit breaker deferment, it too limits the taxes that one pays, a qualifying applicant pays, to only 4% of their income. And similarly, the difference is deferred until a disqualifying event occurs. And that's much of the setup of this long-term homeowner payment plan program. Next slide, please. The payment plan would continue until there's a disqualifying event. And those two disqualifying events would be when the home sells. The full balance will be due and payable when the home sells, which it usually is paid at closing anyways, except for inheritance. If it's inherited, then that is not a disqualifying event. We wanted to preserve that property if it is passed down to the next generation. The other disqualifying event would be 10 years from the due date of the first year of taxes, meaning if we start this program, we are starting in 2020, started this program in 2020, those 2020 taxes become due September 1st, 2020. So before September 1st, 2030, the qualifying participant of this program would need to pay the 2020 taxes, only that 1 year. And then in 2031, they would pay the deferred 2021 taxes and so on. So we have worked it so that the full balance, if the property isn't sold, the full balance isn't due and payable all at one time. If the disqualifying event is 10 years, then they pay 1 year at a time until there is that property sale. And what they would need to pay each year would be that 4% of income, much like the circuit breaker deferment. So they would come in and based on whatever their household income is, they would pay 4% of their income towards their property tax bill. The remainder would be deferred for up to 10 years. Next slide, please. The estimated costs in revenue, from a long-term perspective, there really would be no loss in revenue. it all would be paid back at some point. But from a fiscal standpoint and an annual standpoint, because we would have people participating in this program and not paying their full tax bill, there would be a loss in revenue annually. It'd be paid back eventually, but annually there would be a loss in revenue. The way I calculated that was basically taking what we had estimated for the coalition's proposal, the grant-based program, and applying a fraction to that, because we would not have as many participants in this payment plan program as we would in the grant-based program. That's where the revenue figures at the bottom of the screen come from. Additional staff, we would need far fewer additional staff members to administer this program because of the participation. We've estimated that we would need 3 additional delinquent collectors, basically revenue agents in our office. Between the salary and benefits, the operating cost, all of that, it would cost approximately $206,550 annually to administer this program. Next slide, please. This gives a snapshot of one of the first arguments, one of the first needs that I heard when I came to Durham, and that was the gentrification that occurred, the substantial increase in values that occurred in the 2016 and 2019 reappraisals. So I had a commissioner that asked, how does this compare? How does the 4% compare to what this person would have paid before those reappraisals? And I did that calculation, and you can see that in most situations it's similar. The top example, the household income is $20,000. The 2020 tax value was $160,000. I backed down into a pre-2016 value by reducing the $160,000 home value by 50% for those last 2 reappraisals. So what I'm saying is that in 2008 through 2015, when there was no reappraisal, it was $71,000. And then 2016, when we had a reappraisal, we had assumed a 50% increase and applied that. So when you look at these 3 different scenarios, the 4% that they'd be required to pay in 2020, it's similar to what they would have paid in 2008 before the gentrification of the 16 and 19 reappraisals. Now, the important part of that is that the 4% is only a portion of their 2020 tax bill, but just showing you from a payment to payment perspective what that looks like. Next slide, please. All right, and this compares a 4% required payment annually versus a 2% required payment annually. And you can see the differences there. Basically, you would pay, a taxpayer will pay less each year, but that same taxpayer will be deferring more each year at the same time. And in addition to deferring more, the interest cost would add up more because of that larger outstanding balance. But I wanted to show the different options here. The commissioners approved a 4% required payment because of its comparability to the circuit breaker deferment. But I wanted to also give the option of a 2% repayment option, just to paint a clear picture of this and show you what it would look like. Next slide, please. All right, so the next couple of slides, this was prompted by Dr. Savara. I had a conversation with him, had a lot of conversations with him to get to this point. Very good conversations. And the question he asked is, what if someone's income rises above the threshold? Do they have to pay it all back? And my answer to that is no. Someone's rise in income above the 30% AMI, it is not one of our 2 disqualifying events. So what would happen, I give the example here, someone's income rises above 30% in tax year 2025. Well, the previous tax years where they participated in this program are good until a disqualifying event occurs, which would be either when the property sells or when the taxes have been in the program for 10 years. A rise in income does not disqualify you. Going to the next slide, please. I have an example of an inheritance. Continuing on with the example of Vanessa homeowner, Let's assume that instead of Vanessa's income rising, that she actually passes away in tax year 2025, and her son Tom inherits that property in 2025. Well, Tom's living there. He doesn't have to do the 10-year ownership requirement. So if his income meets, then he would qualify for the program too. But for the sake of this example, we're saying that Tom and his household income does not meet the 30% AMI. So Tom can't qualify. Is that balance due and payable since he inherited the property? His income is too high. He inherited it. There has not been a disqualifying event here. Same situation as Vanessa before. He would, those years 2020 through 2024 that were in the program, they would continue on until a disqualifying event occurred. And then at that point, they would be due and payable, but not just the rise in income. Next slide, please. So the key takeaways of this payment plan program is that it's fully legal. There's no question about that. There's no legal concerns. There's no loss in revenue from a long-term perspective, although it would affect budgeting. And it captures a population that has no other resource. They don't qualify for the homestead. They don't qualify for the circuit breaker. The beauty of this program is that there's no age requirement. There's no age requirement. So that, you know, it captures that population. It's, we also, I guess, at the same time here, we'll be working on a fundraising effort, because the one thing that we can't do, unfortunately, is negotiate or relieve the interest and the fees that will continue to accrue on this deferred balance. That's set by state law for every county in North Carolina. So what we want to do, what we're looking to do at lightning speed here, we're working on it, is to initiate a private fundraising effort. So that, and I gave the example in the joint meeting, we have 120,000 parcels in Durham County, maybe a little more than that now. And if we can get only 10% participation rate, meaning 12,000 parcels, and they contribute only $10 towards this fund, that would go a long way in helping us cover the interest and fees upon a disqualifying event, it seems to me. So we're starting that immediately as well. And you know, the last thing with this program is that it would affect collection rate. Durham has had a very successful, very high collection rate for a number of years. But since taxes would be deferred and not collected as part of this program, the collection rate would drop. There's no way around that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next two options, and trying to think outside of the box, and I realize with this option there are some legislative hurdles, and it is not the best answer for what the community needs. But this is a way to bolster affordable housing, is the Community Land Trust program.
Brinson?
Mm-hmm.
I think that we really want to focus on what you presented so far. And so let's go over these slides quickly. I know we don't have you here for long, and we want to make sure that we're able to ask you some questions. So if you could just kind of zip through this last part. I know that our real big concern here is the tax deferral. Absolutely. Thank you. So we can go into the next slide. The last remaining option, one more slide, please. The last remaining option is just a housing repair program, recognizing that it may not be just taxes that this population is struggling with. So partnering with the city of Durham to build up a housing repair program. Those are the three options, and granted, the one of more immediate concern is the payment plan deferral. So with that, I'll open it up for any discussion and questions the council may have.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, those of us on Joint City County had heard this presentation before, and of course, we've all had a chance to read it in our packets. But I really appreciate you being here, Mr. Brinson. You've done a very, very good job of creating and explaining the program to us. So thank you very much. Just to refresh everyone's memory, we had supported a program of grants to to support long-term low-income homeowners. The county, as Mr. Brinson alluded to, the county attorneys felt very strongly that that was not a legal option for the county. And then Mr. Brinson, working with the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit and others, came up with this option instead. This option has been passed by the county commission. This is not something that they're not sending it to us to say, what do you think? Do you want to alter it this way and that way? They're sending us to say, do you want to join this program? That's the question that we're being asked is, and that we're asking ourselves really, is do we want to join this program of tax payment deferral? And we did receive a letter from Mr. Svara for speaking for the coalition, and they are very supportive of this option as well. So I just wanted to position a little bit for folks and then ask now if there are any questions for Mr. Brinson. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brinson, thank you for being with us. The hypothetical that you talk about at slide 11 in your presentation assumes that the original homeowner's son, Tom, lives in the home. Is that a requirement such that inheritance will not be a triggering event?
Yes, one of the requirements of the program is that it be maintained as the principal residence. That would be a requirement.
So that is inheritance is, so it's not true to say that inheritance is not a triggering event. It's true to say that inheritance may or may not be a triggering event based on the intentions of the inheritor with the property. Is that correct?
Correct. They have to live in the property. That is correct.
Right. Okay. The other thing is a terminology thing. You've talked about annual revenue loss. There's no revenue loss. There's deferred revenue in every year that the county must, according to you, and will be collecting at some future date. So talking about this program as having revenue loss is technically incorrect and can be misleading to folks. There is a cost to the program. It's the staff time. But there's also revenue from the program aside from the deferred revenues, and that is fees and interest that would not otherwise be collected by the county. And so I don't see any accounting for that in here. But it seems clear to me that there's at least a chance, given that depending on the volume of deferrals, that this could actually be a money-making operation. Isn't that right?
The interest and fees would add up over the course of this agreement. That is true. So at the end, whether it's a private entity that's paying or the taxpayer that's paying from the proceeds, that interest and fees, in addition to the principal tax, would be due and payable. And it would be more than would have been due originally. That is correct.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Brinson. I appreciate you answering those questions. Mr. Mayor, to answer the question that you say the county commission is posing to us, no, I do not want the city to participate in this program, but I will vote to allow the city to participate in the program. This program is awful. It does not help working families maintain wealth in their families. It delays somewhat the loss of people's capital that they own in these homes and sets them up for qualifying events that will utterly overwhelm that value that is in their homes. But I believe it is at least marginally better than the current system that's in place. And while I disagree vehemently with the county attorney's determination of the legal risk involved here, and have said so ad nauseum in this body, that is not my choice to make. And so for those reasons and with deep regret and some nausea, I will end up supporting this program. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Caballero.
I want to emphatically associate myself with Councilmember Reese's comments. I too will be supporting it because we're not being left with much better options than what we already have, which we already know is not sufficient. I'm kind of tired of our society really just hating on poor people, and I'm really welcoming the day when we stop hating on poor people. And
Thank you, Councilmember. Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll support it as well. I think our program's better. You know, I think providing grants that don't defer taxes and don't have to be repaid was a better option with regard to actually helping folks for the long term. You know, I mean, this is a short-term benefit. I don't think we can deny that there's some short-term benefit for folks who will be able to stay in their homes, but I am concerned about whether people will adopt it, you know, like whether people will want to deal with an ever-growing deferred tax burden that they know they're going to have to deal with down at some point down the line. We need to find better ways to do this, and I think ultimately the state needs to allow us to do more effective and more redistributive, that's a long word, tax policy, because we're really stuck. Like there's really not much that's allowed, and this is an attempt to kind of wiggle our way in between like what we want to do and what's allowed. And yeah, and it's just it's not great. Our grant program also wasn't great. It's better than this, but it still wasn't great, and we didn't get a lot of people taking it up, and we had a lot of administrative costs that were you know, burdening the city for giving away small amounts of money. There aren't a lot of good solutions that we have for dealing with this issue right now, and we really need the state to give us some better tools. In addition, you know, I find it frustrating that the county approved this without consulting us. I think that we have a very recent experience of going to the county with a proposal and spending a lot of time getting feedback and several meetings, having discussion, and generally involving people in the conversation before moving forward with something. And the county kind of just approved this and said, here, take it or leave it. And that's frustrating to me, given, especially in the context of the other process that we're working with the county for, where we have given lots and lots of room and space for feedback and for their concerns to be heard. So I guess this is both an argument for better tools from the state and a consolidated government. But given where we're at, none of those things are possible. In the next 2 minutes, I will be voting to support the proposal.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Caballero emphatically associated herself with Councilor Reese's comments. I want to put a cape on emphatic. I want to super emphatically associate myself, if there is such a thing, with Councilor Reese's comments. The mystique and the power and the sacred nature of areas like Hayti and Bragtown were not just because Black folk lived there. It's because Black folk thrived there, because wealth was generated, because we owned it. Maintaining neighborhoods and pushing back against gentrification is not just about the optics of Black and brown faces just living where they historically lived. It's about being able to leverage their ownership to put kids through school and to take vacations and to buy a spot down at the beach or do whatever they want to do. This is hurtful. It's a good faith evidence. And Brinson, Brother Brinson, this isn't about you personally, obviously, but this is just hurtful because it's what we have on the table right now. But if there are folk listening and there are folk watching, and particularly Black homeowners or folk in these neighborhoods, keep your land if you can. Pool our resources and keep ownership of the stuff that we have if we can. If we have to pool our resources and help each other make the repairs. And I know it's hard. You can't pay your taxes. The house is in disrepair and somebody shows up with a briefcase with $150,000 in it. You paid 50 grand for the house. They're going to turn around and sell it for 400 grand or tear it down and sell it for 400 grand. If we can keep it, let's keep it. I'm going to support it, but it's hurtful because it's not just about living there. It's about thriving there. It's about having power and having options that wealth brings, that home ownership brings, that ownership brings. With that said, I'll be supporting the program, but I hope that through our ingenuity and creativity and tenacity as we move forward, we can come up with better options as a government. But we know that there are some things that government can't do for folk. So that's another conversation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Mr. Brinson, I don't want to keep you because I know that you're supposed to be at another meeting, but I do believe that there are other staff members here with us.
They've just activated their cameras. I have Deputy Tax Administrator Teresa Hairston and the Division Manager of our tax relief area, Amanda Markle, here as well. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with the council today. Sorry I had to leave early.
Mr. Brinson, thank you for your efforts. We really appreciate all the effort you've put into this, and we appreciate you being with us here today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Hairston and Ms. Markle, we welcome you. Thank you for being here, and we may have some more questions for you as well. Okay, colleagues, other questions, comments? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor Schewel. I just can't say enough that my colleagues have covered the gambit of it, and I would just tack on that this is why our legislative agenda will matter so much more, and making sure that we're attacking this at the state level and also at the federal level as we pull together conversations around things even as far-fetched as reparations. This work has been a lot of fighting within a box and coming up with solutions that don't necessarily solve the problems we know need to be addressed. And I appreciate the effort that the county's put into this, but know that we have a long way to go on it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, colleagues. Any more comments or questions for Ms. Hairston or Ms. Markle? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add a quick comment. Ms. Hairston, I've never met you before, but you and I are frequent email correspondence with a Durham City resident. And I just want to thank you for your patience and perseverance in communicating with her. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
We know who that resident is, Ms. Hairston. You have our appreciation and our sympathy. Let's see, any other comments or questions? So, colleagues, there's an estimate here that this could cost in the loss of current revenue. I believe the estimate is $430,000 in city funds. We don't actually know what that will be. We don't know what the uptake will be. Councilmember Reese.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is no loss in revenue, Mr. Mayor. Revenue is deferred until trigger until.
Okay. I said current revenue, but all right, deferred revenue of $430,000, but that in the year in which that will mean next year we would have, if this estimate holds true, $430,000 less in tax receipts than we are planning on. This is not nothing. And so I think that's something we haven't really introduced into the discussion yet that I did want to introduce. We don't really know what that number is going to be because we don't know what the uptake on this program is going to be. I will also say that I did say to Mr. Brinson at the Joint City County that I don't think the private fundraising will work unless there is a checkoff on the tax bill. And Ms. Harrison, I don't know if you all have been able to attack that problem yet.
Yes, sir. We have been able to. We do plan on including a checkoff box on the tax bill. As you know, tax bills have not gone out for this year yet because we are making these modifications. But yes, sir, we will include that this year.
Good. Well, that's helpful. It'll be interesting to see what that produces, but I think that's a a sine qua non of succeeding with this. So thank you very much. All right. My understanding, again, Ms. Harrison, from Mr. Brinson, is that this can be on our regular agenda on September 8th. You all don't have what you put on the tax bills in your schedule and sending the tax bills will not be influenced by when we pass this. Is that correct?
That is correct. At this point, we do not know when the tax bills will go out. Our plans are for them to go out in September, because we do want to get them in people's in the citizens' hands. But we don't have a date yet. But September is our drop dead date.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Manager Page.
Mr. Mayor, at this point, this is a non-action item. It's a presentation item, and so it would not advance on the agenda.
Okay, so if we want it to advance on the agenda, we need to let you know that. Correct?
Yes, we would need to discuss what type of action.
All right.
We would have around it.
All right. I think that I'm going to then why don't we do this? Why don't we put this onto GBA, and we can hear any other thoughts that the administration has about it prior to that time, and we can take it up on September the 8th. Is that okay with both the administration and colleagues? Ms. Page, are you good with that?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Colleagues, can I see some thumbs? All right, looks good. That's what we'll do then. Ms. Hairston and Ms. Markle, thank you for your work on this, and thank you for being with us today. We very much appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate you collecting the tax revenue too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, we're now down to what I believe to be our final item, which is the second quarter crime report. And I know that Chief Davis is here, and I want to thank you, Chief, for hanging with us. I hope you've been doing some other things while we've been meeting. I hope you've been able to get some other work done, but we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Are you ready for me to proceed?
Yes, ma'am. Please do.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Almost evening, but good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity to present the Durham Police Department's 2020 second quarter crime report. If I start at the first slide here, my report this afternoon summarizes the Durham Police Department's 5 performance measures: Part 1, violent crime; Part 1, property crime, response times to priority 1 calls, staffing levels, and I'll also briefly cover other 2020 second quarter highlights, just briefly. Can you back up a few slides? There we go. There we are. So before I get started with the crime report, I'd like to announce recent leadership changes in the Durham Police Department. Our executive command staff has a bit of a new look as a result of several recent promotions. 2 new deputy chiefs, Sherry Montgomery and Gregory Pickrell, have now joined Deputy Chief Kevin Case as the second highest ranking leaders in our department. Deputy Chief Montgomery oversees the administrative services, and Deputy Chief Pickrell oversees investigative services. 3 new majors, Melissa Bishop, Joseph Kelly, and Walter Tate Jr., joined Major Ed Savras in the department's 3rd highest rank of commanders. Major Bishop is assigned to the Administrative Services Bureau. Major Kelly is assigned to the Field Operations Bureau, Zone B, and Major Tate is assigned to the Investigative Services Bureau. Next slide. Other recent promotions and transfers, just so that you'll know, we had some district changes as well, include new commanders in 3 districts. Captain Demetrius Motz has returned to District 1, where he previously served as commander before working in the training division. Captain Mark Clancy was recently promoted and assigned to District 4, which covers Southern Durham. Captain Marianne Bond was recently assigned to District 5 after working in the Professional Standards Division. District 5, of course, is our downtown space and in our 9th Street area. Captain Robert Gaddy remains commander in District 2 in Northern Durham, and Captain April Brown is the commander in District 3 in the Western Durham area. Next slide. Now moving into the crime report for the second quarter. I'll begin the crime report with Part 1, violent crime, which includes homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Part 1, violent crime was up 14% during the first 6 months of 2020 compared to the same period in 2019. This was largely due to an increase in non-domestic firearms-related aggravated assaults. There were 16 criminal homicides in the first 2 quarters of 2020 compared to 21 in the first 2 quarters of 2019. During the first 6 months of 2020, investigators cleared 7 cases that originated this year and 1 case from 2019. One 2020 homicide case has been classified as a domestic violence. There have been 22 criminal homicides year to date for up to today's date in 2020, and 14 remain open. The number of reported sexual assaults during the first 6 months of 2020 was down 9% compared to the same period of 2019. 25% of rape cases reported during the first 2 quarters of 2020 happened in 2019 or earlier. Robberies in the city dropped by 8% during the first 6 months of 2020 compared to the same period in 2019. 79% of the robberies during the first half of 2020 were from persons compared to 86% in the first 6 months of 2019. Recently, we've seen a return of a trend of robberies with Hispanic victims. An increase occurred in the last several weeks. We've begun another prevention campaign, which was very helpful. The last time we saw this trend, utilizing social media and the local radio stations to communicate to our Hispanic community members in Spanish. We also have identified a new candidate as the new liaison for our Hispanic community. We had 2 individuals that did a great job in that position and stayed very busy, but both of them were promoted, and we are now in the process of acclimating a new person for that position. 57% of all robberies involved firearms. During the second quarter, the increases in violent crime percentages were primarily driven by a 29% increase in reported aggravated assaults, particularly multi-victim firearms incidents. 43% of all aggravated assaults during the first 2 quarters were from multi-victim firearm incidents versus 31% during the first 6 months of 2019, comparing those same 2 periods. It should be noted that one firearm-related incident may produce multiple victims, and in some cases, the incident may not result in any injuries at all. Nevertheless, these incidents are factored in overall aggravated assault calculations. For example, there was a shooting in the parking lot of Chick-fil-A on Hillsborough Road on July 30th. The occupants of 2 vehicles fired numerous shots at each other, but no one was actually injured. Bullets struck 2 occupied vehicles in the drive-thru, and at least 1 bullet struck the business itself. The overall nature of this incident in aggregation accounted for 18 victims, even though no one was hurt. There were the 2 people in the drive-thru, 2 Chick-fil-A employees working outside at the drive-thru, and 14 employees inside the business. Even though no one was injured, these 18 people were in fact in immediate danger and considered victims. I just wanted to give an example, especially to those that are listening that may not understand sometimes how we calculate aggravated assaults. 27% of all aggravated assault cases were domestic violence related. Next slide. And now we'll move on to our property, our Part 1 property crimes. Part 1 property crimes include burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft. Part 1 property crime makes up 83% of all Part 1 crimes during this second quarter period. Overall, Part 1 property crime was up by 6% at the end of second quarter. Residential burglaries were down by 8%, while burglaries to businesses were up significantly. We are attributing that to more residents being at home and less burglary victimization, less opportunities for burglaries, because a lot of people have been out of work or either working from out of their homes. The top 3 business types targeted were specialty stores, convenience stores, and restaurants. These statistics are likely due to the pandemic, as I mentioned before, with the environment sort of having an impact on this particular property crime. Larcenies accounted for 60% of all reported Part 1 crime. 43% of larcenies were from motor vehicles. 31% of larcenies involved shoplifting. We continue to receive numerous reports of tools and construction equipment being stolen. These type of crimes are also driven by seasonal factors as well. A lot of folks are working outside and a lot of activity outside right now with various types of construction and lawn work and etc. As usual, Honda Accords remain the top vehicle type that's stolen in the city. At least 42% of all stolen vehicles were left running and or had the keys left in them. That just seems to be a trend in the city of Durham, and we just can't seem to change that, unfortunately. As mentioned before, more people have been at home during these last few months, and I believe people have gotten a little careless with leaving vehicle keys in the car and cars in the driveway. But we're particularly concerned about this, though, because we've had several reports where vehicles were stolen, and then subsequently, those vehicles were used in other crimes, including shootings. I also want to remind the public not to leave firearms inside unattended vehicles. We have received several reports of guns being stolen during vehicle break-ins, and then those guns being used subsequently in other crimes. Next slide. As you know, we compare the Durham Police Department's clearance rates to those of other departments our size. Our clearance rates were better than average for cities our size in burglaries, larcenies, and overall Part 1 property crimes. While this chart is sort of a year-to-date as of the end of the second quarter, we have the rest of the year to work on our clearance rate. So there's going to be about 6 months of work that'll push these numbers hopefully up. We typically do better than the FBI clearance rates every year. As a note on the rate clearances, approximately 25% of the cases were from prior years. Also, rape cases often require tests such as DNA, and these tests sometimes, even though they're doing better as far as the return on test results or these kit results, there's still somewhat of a delay. We expect our clearance rates to improve as the year goes on. Next slide. Priority 1 calls. There were 3,910 priority 1 calls for service in the first half of 2020, which was a 1% decrease from 3,954 priority 1 calls during the same period in 2019. relatively close numbers from one period to the next comparatively. Our average response time was 5.55 minutes, which was better than our target of 5.8 minutes or less. We answered 58.6% of priority 1 calls in less than 5 minutes in the first 2 quarters of 2020. This was better than our target for 57%. We continue to reallocate our manpower to address the various issues throughout the city. We've adjusted the supplemental staffing to ensure more officers are in service during peak call times. There was less traffic on the streets during a good portion of the first months of the year due to the pandemic. As a matter of fact, on some days there was hardly no traffic on the streets, especially during rush hour. So we believe that some of the pandemic, the environment has had an impact on call response as well. As a result, officers are often spending less time on calls as well because of their ability to understand how important it is to go in, deal with whatever situation at a distance, and then return into service. Not as much chatting, and even though, you know, communication is good for our officers in the community, but that type of interaction has been limited because of the environment. And they have worked as directed to lessen personal contact with people in order to keep everybody safe. There were also fewer self-initiated calls for service. These factors freed up officers to other calls as well to respond quickly. A telephone response unit. We have officers now, especially those who are on light duty, instead of assigning them to other administrative tasks, we have them actually responding to citizens via telephone to sort of take off some of the workload of officers in certain calls that don't necessarily require an officer to be there. So more than 1,300 calls for service during the second quarter were handled by officers who were on light duty and were able to take some of that workload off of our officers out on patrol. Our response time returned more to normal during July as more motorists were beginning to drive the roads and more activity of individuals in our city came about. Next slide. Our sworn staffing was at 93% at the end of June 2020 compared to 96% at the end of June 2019. About 30 of these vacancies will be filled pending applicants that are being hired and prepared for our next BLET that we anticipate to start this fall. Our non-sworn staffing was at 89% at the end of June 2020 compared to 97% at the end of June 2019. 16 recruits graduated this year from BLET number 50. That was earlier this year. We currently have 19 BLET recruits and 1 limited enrollee ALET recruit. These individuals are scheduled to graduate this fall, and we plan to start another class this fall as well. We've hired 3 transfers or ALET, those lateral transfer recruits. There are several other ones that are in the background process. Our recruiting unit continued to work during the pandemic and process applications virtually. Potential applicants were encouraged to apply through city's website. They were contacted by our recruiters, and we continued to process and interview virtually. We have not seen a significant decrease in the interest from potential applicants, and we are seeing several applicants from the Durham community. So our efforts to hire homegrown is improving, and I'm pleased about that. In the last few months, though, we've had a loss of about 18 sworn employees. No particular themes were associated with these departures, even though it was quite a few. We had 7 sworn individuals to retire. We had 2 that found other employment. One was employment with a non-law enforcement entity. One was employment with another law enforcement agency. We had 3 recruits to resign and 1 termination. And then we had 4 resignations in lieu of an IA investigation. Next slide. So the U visa process is still ongoing, and the Durham Police Department processed 48 U visa requests during the second quarter of 2020. 58% of those were approved. Next slide. So during the second quarter, it was an unusual period for us. You know, we were challenged with a number of different elements. We continue to deal with the effects of the malware attack on our computers, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, we had the onset of protests, you know, following the May 25th death of George Floyd while in custody of Minneapolis police officers. Regardless of the challenges we've encountered, we've continued to provide the service levels that we think are important to our community. We've had to make some modifications in the manner in which we respond and how we interact with the community, but we're becoming more and more acclimated to this new normal. We worked hard to ensure the safety of our employees and our residents. So this hasn't been a cookie cutter approach for us. We've had to make some adjustments day to day sometimes, and even with protests. I would have to say that just addressing and making sure that our community members had safe space to be able to exercise their First Amendment rights has been a priority. And we even had an opportunity to communicate with individuals that camped out here at police headquarters, their street, our street, their headquarters, our headquarters. So we have been able to get past some of the difficult, moments that were on the heels of the George Floyd incident and so many other tragedies around the country, with a level of empathy and understanding in our community as well. We also have been resourceful in finding new ways to get the job done as it relates to our community engagement. We've done a lot of virtual types of work and communicating with the community. We plan to work with NIS on establishing a way to reach out to our PACs virtually so that we can continue to provide crime information. Since the PACs aren't meeting, we still feel it's important for us to reestablish that line of communication with our PAC leaders. So we're in conversations about what that will look like as well. Our officers have participated, and so have I, in police reads. We have been recording virtually to some of our students who have been at home, who have enjoyed listening to books being read virtually to them, and in an effort to continue to grow our relationships. Trying to see where else. So the only enforcement action that we've had during our protests primarily was an incident here at police headquarters, and then another one at our old headquarters building that most of you are already familiar with. And on June 22nd, I joined Sheriff Burkhead, officers, and community activists in a unity march to help bring peace and healing in our city. On June 16th, I testified before the U.S. Senate Judiciary on police reform matters. Unfortunately, we had a few hate crime types of incidents in the city during the second quarter, which was something that we hadn't seen, in a while. But there have been 5 hate crimes reported in Durham since the death of George Floyd. 2 were anti-white and 3 were anti-Black. 2 occurred on the same unoccupied residential property on the north side, and we treated these cases with deliberate urgency to try to calm the community and try to get them involved as well in trying to identify who could have potentially perpetrated those acts. In the next slide, the Durham Police Department has been very passionate about our community engagement. Employees raised more than $10,000 for the Autism Society of North Carolina, far surpassing the original goal of raising $1,000. They were very, very active and involved in this fundraising opportunity. And the recipients of these funds were just elated that they had that level of participation. In addition, the Durham Police Department secured first place in the state for funds raised by the agency's groups participating in Special Olympics as well. So Durham Police Department was recognized also for fundraising for the virtual torch run statewide. And the Durham Police Department's crisis intervention team participated in promotions to help bolster the support for NAMI. Most of you are familiar with NAMI. In this particular campaign was NAMI Walks Your Way, North Carolina, promotions, the nation's largest series of mental health awareness and fundraising events. And closing out, next slide. The pandemic didn't keep Durham Police employees from reaching out to the community during the second quarter. Our employees were very busy in community engagement and in finding ways to reach out to the residents. Here in these illustrations are just a few examples of the many outreach projects. Squad 1C officers cleaned up a problem area near the intersection of Holloway Street and Austin Avenue in May, and 2 new recruits cleaned up Duke Park after the Memorial Day holiday weekend. One of our new officers, Officer Hunton, handed out 60 bags of supplies for the homeless. This was part of her neighborhood portfolio exercise, which is a required community outreach project by all of our police recruits. They have to come up with a need, find a solution, and actually execute that as part of their curriculum going through their police academy experience. And then last but not least, officers also help children celebrate graduations. They found that there were a lot of kids in our community who couldn't celebrate their graduations, and officers participated in various types of parades when requested to help our young people celebrate graduations, birthdays, and so on. So that pretty much ends my report, and I am open to any questions that any of the council may have.
Thank you very much, Chief. Colleagues, I'll start with Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming, Chief Davis. We appreciate your report. I also appreciate your service to the city. I had a chance to watch your testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. You did great, and you represented our city very well. So thank you for taking on that extra duty. It's not normally within your job description, but we really appreciate you doing it. It was great.
Thank you.
I came to the meeting with some questions about clearance rates and response times, but you actually anticipated my questions and answered it very well. I know you and I had a conversation about the response time in your last quarterly report, so maybe that got you ready for this one. I don't know, but you explained it. Finally, now I can get my head around what's going on with the data, so I really appreciate you doing that.
Oh, well, good.
That was thoughtful. I did have a question about domestic violence crimes. From looking at the numbers, it looks like we've seen we've seen an increase in crimes of domestic violence over this time last year. I know I've read a lot about how COVID-19 and this period of physical distancing has really exacerbated those kinds of problems, removed from prospective victims the ability to get away, or at least get away very easily. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the department is responding to that new reality, and how we're trying to help victims in these types of situations.
So to your point, you're right. There have been quite a few publications about the increase in domestic violence during the pandemic, sort of, in cities around the country, and the fact that people are at home, and not just between domestic partners, but also amongst other family members. So our officers are trained in lethality assessment, and I can't reiterate how important that training is right now for the officers to be able to recognize where certain indicators are present to push a little bit harder for individuals in the home that could potentially become a victim to get the help and the oversight that's needed. The beauty in the lethality assessment is that it's not just a training for police officers. Judges and also DAs and other individuals in the court system and the criminal justice system are also trained on lethality assessment so that they can also identify where a victim or a witness might be a potential victim of a lethal encounter. So I think the training and continued communication it's ironic that we're talking about this mainly because today our criminal investigations division commander has come up with a protocol that has some extra steps in it so that we don't allow people to slip through the cracks. A little bit more communication, a little bit more consulting with supervisors about various types of domestic violence cases. Myself and the DA have been in conversation about the fact that there is an ADA that the city is funding for domestic violence and special victims types of cases. And we plan to have a more intimate type of relationship and conversations as it relates to domestic violence cases as well.
That's great to hear. I'm going to be on I'm going to attend the meeting of that kind of interdisciplinary task force on DV that's sponsored by the Crisis Center tomorrow. And so hopefully we'll hear more about that. But thank you for all your work you're doing on that and for continuing to focus on gun crime in the city. I know that that's something that your officers are focused on quite a bit. And just thank you for that focus as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I had today.
Thank you,
Council Member. Other colleagues? Other colleagues at this time? Chief, I want to pass on some remarks that I received. We had one of our local pastors who wanted to comment today, but we're not taking public comment until until September. But I did call him. I had word that he wanted to comment, and just told him I would pass on his comments. It's Pastor William Lucas, who you may be familiar with at First Chronicles. And you and I actually corresponded both with, and I'm sure you talked to him on the phone as I did last week.
Yes.
Terrible murder on Lincoln Street outside of his church. And he wanted to say, I asked him to tell me what he would like me to say. First of all, he's a preacher. He's a very eloquent preacher. I'm not going to attempt to in any way reproduce what Pastor Lucas, how he would say it if he was here. But he did say to please let you know that it's very important that we support our police, that it as a pastor of a woman who lost a son and then was just brokenhearted that he had to counsel very soon thereafter, that it was just such an incredible tragedy. It happened right outside the church. And he said that he was just brokenhearted that at 4:00 in the afternoon that somebody could pull up in broad daylight in Hayti with a military style weapon, roll the window down and shoot somebody. And he said that we really need to support our police and your efforts to stop this kind of violent crime. And the other thing that he expressed was that, and he had talked to me, and I expect said this to you as well, the need for therapy for victims. He just thinks that is just such a huge need, and for not just the family of the victims, but in his case, the church community. And I think that's something that we all need to think about as a community. And I appreciated very much hearing that from Pastor Lucas. But I did want to pass those on as I told him I would do. I thought you all did a fantastic job dealing with the protests. I can't remember if we've been together since then. I don't think so. But the way you all, as I thought your description of just now, that you made sure that our residents had the ability to exercise their First Amendment rights is absolutely the right attitude. And if more police departments had that attitude, we wouldn't have seen a lot of the things that we saw around the country. And thank you for that. I think that Durham was different. And I've heard so many people, as I know you have, say how proud that they were of our police department and also of the leadership of our protests. And so I just want to express my gratitude. I think that it takes a lot of patience to do that. I mean, you have to, not only you have to be patient, but you really have to imbue in your officers the need to be patient and to wait until things are calm and not try to be confrontational. And you did that. And you did it again when there was the tent city in front of the department. I mean, I think that was, that was, we were all very patient with that and let it work itself out and had a lot of conversations. And my council colleagues and I were down there on several occasions to talk to them. And I really, again, want to thank you for that. So you've led us through a very tough time and you've done it very well. And I just want to offer my gratitude, Chief.
Thank you. And I will say, Mayor Schewel, that if it weren't for the support and the voices of City Council in so many different forums as well, I think it's, it has to be a collective effort for everyone to use their influence where it's appropriate and where it's most powerful. So, we did one side of it, and I have to congratulate the officers because that's absolutely not what they're accustomed to. And, unfortunately, sometimes, officers are trained to respond a different kind of way. But I think even our officers recognize how important it is at a time like this to step back and make assessments of what's in front of us and realize that there's a lot of room for improvement, in our police departments, and there's a lot of room for improvement, in our communities, but we can't move forward unless we open the lines of communication and work together towards, a common goal. So thank you all for the support that you've provided as well.
Chief, that reminds me, you and I have been working with the city manager and our public information staff, our public affairs staff on the 8 Can't Wait response. And I don't know that all of my colleagues know what you all have done in that regard. May not have seen the police department website and our outreach plan. Would you comment on that?
So, I think the initial steps for me were to look at our current policies to see where we align with what best practices are. And what I can say is that the Durham Police Department is in compliance, not with just 8 Can't Wait. We're 8 Can't Wait and more. And we've been 8 Can't Wait and more because those are just a few of the important elements that, I think is critical in the way we respond to our community. But there's so many other aspects of our work, everything from ensuring that our officers are trained in racial equity and, the culture of the police department. Culture is critical in law enforcement. Culture eats policy for lunch. And that is so true. If you don't get the culture under control, you can have all the best policies in the world. So there's so many other elements that I've been working on in this department since I've gotten here. And it takes time for us to shift. But I have to applaud the agile response from our officers and our team to make the adjustments to our policy so that people can understand, number one, why the policy is written the way it is, where the officer's safety is taken under consideration, and not to write policies that we can't stand up to, that we can't 100% say that this is a cookie cutter approach and this policy can read just like this. So I think it requires a lot of communication, and I think in our efforts to communicate and your commitment to President Obama's challenge to city mayors, I think we're accomplishing, what we set out to do.
And Chief, I'm going to record a short video, and I believe you are as well.
I am.
For our community to know what the police department has done in that regard, to be able to access the website and to let us know if they have feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, any comments or questions for the Chief? Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. Congratulations. Councilor Reese already alluded to it. Congratulations on a wonderful showing, not just for us, for your entire profession in front of the Senate. I'm glad you were there. Some of those senators needed to hear what they heard from you, and I couldn't think of a better messenger, so thank you so much. Mr. Mayor, I also want to thank you for doing what I knew you would do and what I told someone you would do. And I don't know if he saw me as a kind of a backstop or fail safe, but I assured him that if you gave him your assurances that it would happen. I had an hour-long conversation with Pastor Lucas last night, who's my friend, and my brother and colleague, and we work closely, Durham can, who expressed to me just how heartbroken the community is. He told me that there were elders sitting out in front of their house tonight. Young man stuck a military assault style weapon out of a window and then came back the next night and shot the same car up. Today, I received a letter from the mother of the victim. I'm not going to read it in full, but she says, hello, Mr. Middleton. My son was murdered on Monday, August 10th, 2020. He was sitting in a car where it was shot up, and he died in between his home and his church, First Chronicles Community Church. My son was one of my 7 children, and I am fighting for justice for his killer. We sought in gun violence to stop. I just don't understand how these young children are able to get weapons that should be in the military, not on the streets. And she writes some other things that I won't share here, but I assured her that I would convey her concern and her desires to this council, and assured her that she had an entire city that was sending her positive love and energy and for prayers and all good thoughts. So I just want to thank you, Chief, for the part that you and your department play. But we know, and I think you alluded to the importance of a partnership, that we ultimately can't police our way out of this situation. There are some things that governments should do, and I think can do, and I will never be quiet about what I think government should be doing. But we also know that there are some things that we got to do. There's an other talk to the talk that needs to take place in our communities and amongst our people, and I know many of us are committed to having that conversation as well. So keep us posted on how things are going. Keep letting us know what you need from us. And thank you for your continued diligence. I'm thankful for the safety of our officers with this increase in shooting, but many of us are still heartbroken, and I just want to let this mother who has written to me know that we take this issue seriously. No metric can take the place of keeping our children safe, not our restaurants, not the height of our buildings, not our economic stability in Durham, if we can't keep our own babies safe. So thank you for the role you play in it. And I know that I speak for a bunch of folk when we say that we are committed to working in tandem with you and bringing this problem under control. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being who I knew you were going to be, and who I assured my colleague that you would be. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Member.
Other colleagues? Thank you, everybody, for those comments. Chief, thank you. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Colleagues, I think we've done a good day's work. Councilmember Freeman said she thought this meeting would go for 3 or 4 hours, and she pretty much nailed it. I think we've been going for 3.5. I want to just say we have with us Carmisha Wallace, Keith Chadwell, and Bo Ferguson, and Beverly Thompson, who we haven't seen today, and Daniel Terry's here with us twice. But just wanted to say to our deputy city managers, we miss you. We miss you, seeing you, Beverly and Carmisha, at our work session meetings. We know you're out there doing the Lord's work, and we know you're still doing it every day. And we just want you to know how much we appreciate you, and just wanted to offer that. Colleagues, I believe that there's no further business to come before this body. Am I correct? Councilmember Reese.
I believe we have to settle the agenda.
Thank you, Madam. There's always something I miss. Thank you, Charlie. Madam Manager, can we settle the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We do have, I would like to ask a question if possible about the GBA item number 16. You know, that was a presentation. It was not an action item.
Yes.
And so we would be leaving that item on GBA as it came through, but it was no action. So
let me say, I see Councilmember Reese wants to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're going to need some guidance from staff on what role the city needs to play in implementing the program that was approved by the county commission with respect to the portion of taxpayers' property tax bill that is levied by the county. You know, that's the larger portion, but we have a portion of that for every Durham City taxpayer, and we're going to need to take some official action to participate in that program, I believe. And I hope staff will give us some direction, but this is not that item.
That is correct. That is correct.
What the DCM is telling us is that this is not that item. This is just a presentation. We're going to have to take some other. We're going to have to take some other action I don't want to take, but I'm willing to take to get the city to participate in that. So.
Well, I think then we need to talk about the way to get to that. If we are planning to participate, then we are going to be needing to take some action. And I'll ask the administration, do you all have any thoughts about how to bring that to us for discussion?
Well, I will say at this point, you know, it came as a presentation item. You know, certainly any kinds of, you know, unique types of relationship that we have as relates to the contract that we have with the county, you know, related to collections would not be, you know, settled here, you know, here today. Certainly, you know, we would be willing to, you know, to look at what leverage, you know, we have as it relates to, you know, the item that was presented here. It essentially amounts to, you know, in substance, somewhat of payment plans and, you know, delayed collection, you know, of property taxes. You know, that is my, you know, initial response to what was presented here. But this is really not an action item in itself.
Okay. Well, I think we need to get to an action item because I think that there's a majority of the council. I know that I've heard from several of our members that they're very supportive of this, or let's just say they wish there was something better, but they would like to go ahead and support this program. So I think that we need to, I guess what I would ask, Madam Manager, is that you all have a discussion with the county administration and find out what we would need to do in order to participate on our end and bring it to us on the appropriate timetable. Does that sound good?
That sounds fine.
Okay.
So in setting the agenda, would you like this item to be disposed of, or?
Well, if you don't think that we're going to be able to act on it at that, under that timetable, then I don't think we need it.
That would be my recommendation.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. So I think I'm ready to set the agenda then.
All right.
Okay. I have for consent items 1 through 9, and for GBA public hearings, items 13 through 15.
Okay, thank you very much. You've heard the manager's recommendation for settling the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes 6-0, and we've settled the agenda. Have I missed anything else, colleagues or staff?
Just one item. I didn't get to make any announcements at the beginning of the meeting. I had a little technical difficulties getting in. I just wanted to note that Councilmember Middleton's presentation yesterday within Poverty Durham was recorded, and I want to make sure that you are all aware, and I think that you should take a look. They did a really good job of covering the universal basic income conversation, and I look forward to hearing back from the community on it.
Thank you for that. I look forward to listening. I won't be rolling my eyes too often either. I'm trying to keep that to a minimum.
So raw.
Okay. Colleagues, thank you. We did a good day's work. And if there's no further business to come before this body, I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned at 4:30 p.m.
Thank you.